Also ask. I don't know what Sec said, but well, actually, Sec can answer that because he's the one who PM'd you.
What's up?
Read general.
No, I don't want to distract your discussion. I just wasn't sure if you asked me here for a reason.
Oh yeah, because we were talking about you.
Oh, well, I guess I'm a topic of conversation. Was there like something in particular?
Yeah, we were talking about your response to Jack's particularist objection.
Okay, well, are we talking about the reply that I made in that debate video to particularism over universalism? Like, why there would be a preference one way or the other?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen that video, but
Yeah, because
we were,
I don't hold to that position anymore. I think he's right about that.
Oh, okay.
but
Wait, so how? So from what I understand, I mean, Jack's here, so I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounds like he's saying that his response to the NTT is just that there are some irreducible facts that don't appeal to other properties that cows have that humans don't have. That is that we can eat them and we can't eat human.
I'm not clear in what sense that's a reply to name the trait. Like, is the trait, like, what is the trait supposed to be?
the trade is
Wait,
that it's permissible to eat them.
The trait is that it's permissible to eat them. So, what? Like, you mean that you view it as permissible?
sorry, say that again.
Because like the whole thing we're asking is like we understand that it's permissible to eat one, and we understand that it's not permissible to eat the other. So the question is basically, as we start modifying the properties of the human to become more and more like the animal, at what point do they fall into that category where it's not okay, or sorry, where it is okay to eat them?
So well, I mean, I don't want to like speak for Jack, but it sounded like he was just saying that the property itself is just the property of being able being able to kill it and eat it, and human doesn't have that property, and that's all there is to it. There's no further fact of the matter.
I'm not clear how exactly that answers the question. So if the question is, at what point in the trait equalization process is value lost? How is that an answer to that question?
I don't think it is. I think he's just saying that that's not under particularism. That's not how it works. But then again, I don't know why I'm speaking for Jack. Jack's here, so I don't know why I'm answering it for him.
Yeah, I actually I don't understand why it would be the case that there's some problem on the view for particularism. But the one thing I want to be really clear about is that I did make an error in the first conversation I had with him. I think the name the trait portion of that conversation, which was the first part, was fine. But unless someone wants to point out some kind of problem there, but in the second portion, when we started talking about particularism, like I honestly to this day am not totally sure exactly what what wavelength I was on there, but whatever reply I was giving, I was saying something like, I'm not a particularist because particularism could justify anything, and he was just replying by saying universalism could justify anything, which is true, right? It's just a point that's just true of both positions, so it's not like a reason to choose one over the other. I think that I was comparing like my specific position to particularism generally, or I was thinking of something like that. But yeah, the one point I want to be really clear about is I don't hold to that position anymore. So yeah, I think that the fact that a particularist could have like moral preferences or values that could justify any action, like a universalist, the same thing applies to them. So that's not a reason to select one over the other. But as for like the question of how talking about like particularism or any of those things you said about particularism are an answer to name the trait, I'm still not clear about that. I don't think they exactly are.
Well, maybe Jack has more to say on it since it is his.
I'm just not seeing what the objection is.
Well, I'm not seeing what the answer to the question is. So the question is
So
just...
what question?
Yeah, so the question would be, on your view, presumably, it's not okay to murder a human and make them into a hamburger. Like if we were to, for example, replace the animals in the factory farms right now with humans, wouldn't be okay to kill them. It is okay right now with it being animals. So the question is just, if we start switching the properties of the human more and more towards the animal until eventually we end up with the same thing, at what point in that process do you look at the being in question and say, okay, it's fine to murder and eat that being?
I'm just not seeing what the argument is. Is there some kind of argument against the view?
No, it's not an argument, it's a question. Is there? I don't see what I meant to be providing an argument for right now.
Well, I thought there was supposed to be some kind of argument that if you think that what makes it the case that it's okay to eat cows but not okay to eat humans is that there's an irreducible, it's okay to eat property in the cow, and there's an irreducible, it's not okay to eat property in the human, right? That there's, supposedly that's supposed to enmesh you in some kind of contradiction, right?
I'm not clear why you'd think that. Like, do you think that that's something that I've said at some point?
No, I'm just wondering if there's an argument against the view.
So there's not an argument that there's some kind of logical problem with just saying this thing has value to me, that thing doesn't have value to me. Then
what more is there to discuss?
Well, I think that basically by kind of engaging in a dialogue process around your moral system, you can expose...
I don't have a system.
Well, look, by system, I just mean your set of values. I think that you can expose conclusions in there that a lot of people would not be comfortable with. And the idea is
why would I care about that?
Well, I was about to say, the idea is like, if we're all some kind of like non-realist here, like I call myself a subjectivist, right? I think that we would just view moral discussion, like we'd view it as being largely about persuading other people of our values, or maybe showing that one of their actions is in discord with what their values are, right?
Where is the discord?
Well, no, the argument. Here, 1 second. You're chopping in on me, and it's making me lose my train of thought. So the idea is just to engage in this kind of dialogue process and see if we can get to the point that we're showing some kind of uncomfortable conclusion on the view for most people, or sometimes there actually is a contradiction.
Yeah, I'm not interested in whether other people find my views uncomfortable enough, right? I just want to understand whether that there's some kind of problem with my holding that view.
By problem, do you mean like there's some kind of like logical issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, the claim has never been that there's some kind of logical issue.
You don't have a defeater for that position, right?
No, I mean, I think that any moral position you can just like, I mean, you could have whatever values you want to have, but you're trying to frame it as if at some point, as if I think that there is a defeater and now I'm in some way conceding.
No, I'm just trying to get clear that you don't have a defeater for this.
Right, so... Well, let me be totally clear about what I'm trying to do. So when I have these conversations, the goal is just to get to the conclusions of what the position says and show that if it's a non-vegan position, it's got conclusions that most people are not going to be happy with. So that's the purpose of asking questions about the position, like the first question that I asked.
It doesn't matter to me whether other people are not happy with it. I'm just wondering if you had a defeater for the position.
Well, if by a defeater you mean some way to show that, like, a given moral position is, like, fundamentally wrong, like, people can have whatever values they want, right? So that's not necessarily what I'm trying to do. Now, I think that you're just saying that you're not interested in the task that I'm setting out to do, and that's fine. You don't have to be interested, but, I am.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, I'm curious what your reply actually would be to the question, though.
I don't have an answer for that.
Right. So if I ask you if you have any clue at all where in the trade equalization process value's lost, your answer is that you don't know?
I mean, I don't see why I would know.
Right.
But I don't see why it's an interesting question if it's not a defeater for my view.
Well, I've already given you an account of what interests me in the situation, right? So it doesn't have to be that there's some kind of logical problem. So for you to keep replying by saying, oh, it's not interesting to me, well, there's a particular thing that I'm trying to get at, right? So Oh, well, if you just don't want to engage in the discussion, that's fine. But I was interested in seeing if there was an argument that there was some kind of untenability in appealing to an irreducible property. No, why that's not at any point what I've been trying to say. So I don't know why you're trying to like sort of thrust that on me. What I think is
I'm not saying you're trying to.
Okay, well then forgive my bad characterization if that's not what you're trying to do. But if there's anything that's untenable with someone like you, who's going to try to be as consistent as possible and who's got a concern for philosophy and logic, it's doubtful that there's going to be a contradiction. What's more likely is just that the view has some kind of unpalatable conclusion. And if you feel like actually engaging in the dialogue process, we can see if we can get to that conclusion.
I don't know what you mean by unpalatable.
A conclusion that would be in dissonance with the values of a large amount of people.
What is the dissonance relation if it's not an inconsistency relation?
It could be an inconsistency between your values and their values, but it doesn't have to be an inconsistency within your values, right? So the idea is if someone has some kind of like dissonance when presented with one of your values, they hold some kind of contrary value or they don't hold that value. So let me just ask. You say that you have absolutely no clue where in the trade equalization process value is lost?
I don't know what the trade equalization process is.
That's just we take the human, we take the animal, and all of the things true of them, and we start equalizing the properties of the human to the properties of the animal until eventually they just have the same properties. And the question is just if you have any idea at all where in that process value drops off.
Not really.
Now that has some kind of crazy implications, right? So if you say you have absolutely no idea, then we can take one step into that process. We get a human with a single cow hair, and apparently you're uncertain of the moral status of that being. That seems wacky to me. So presumably you have some idea.
Is it false?
Pardon? Did you ask me if it's false?
Because when you say crazy, I'm not sure what you mean. You don't mean false.
By crazy, I mean what I'm talking about before. It's going to be in dissonance with my values and likely the values of a large amount of people.
But the point is,
one sec. Before you say what the point is, I think that you're deploying a bit of a...
Now recording.
You're deploying a bit of a, like, I mean, I can't tell if it's intentional or not, but it's as if when I start pushing in the direction of showing something that's going to be uncomfortable to a lot of people about your view, you start replying by asking if the view is false. And I'm already telling you that what I'm doing is not necessarily trying to expose the view as being false or contradictory.
I don't understand. So what I'm saying is that value properties are moral perceptions.
Sure.
Right? Values are moral perceptions.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Now, if I say that I don't know what I'm going to perceive is valuable or disvaluable in some hypothetical circumstance, right? What follows from the fact, right, that some people would have different expectations about how they would be in that situation. I just don't get it.
Oh, well, I mean, if your conclusion about that situation is significantly different than theirs, they're going to disagree with you. I mean, that's the idea.
Yeah,
it's not any more complicated than that.
No, but wait a minute. They already disagree.
They may not disagree with you. They may not realize they disagree with you until the conclusions of the position are teased out. That's the whole idea of it.
I don't know what you mean by that, right? So if I say I don't like chocolate, right, but I like vanilla, and somebody else says, oh, I like chocolate, but I don't like vanilla. And then you say, well, what if you encountered an ice cream sundae that had like a little dollop of vanilla in it, right? And I said, I don't know whether I would like that or not, right? How is that supposed to change somebody's mind if they have discordant values from mine? I just don't understand how this is supposed to work.
Well, the idea is just that if you show that someone's view leads somewhere that a given person won't agree with, that person won't agree with it. I mean, that's kind of like all there is to it. So it's just, if you, it's just the idea is exploring what your view ultimately says and seeing if you and see. Wait, well, come on, Jack. Let me get some words across. So the idea is just to explore what your view says and see if it's ultimately a view that people would agree with. It's not really anything beyond that.
They can't know, right, on a sensibility theoretic view, right, how they would react, right? They can just make
how
guesses
they would react to what?
To being in those situations, right?
Yeah, but I think if your guess about, I mean, I don't know why exactly that's true, but if that's, oh yeah, okay, because I guess when you're visualizing the situation in your head, that's different than actually perceiving it, and you might have a different reaction, sure. But if your determination about what you do in the hypothetical is like sufficiently wacky, like for example, the position that you just put out, where you have no idea where value's lost in the trade equalization process, which would imply that you're completely morally uncertain about a human with a single cow hair on their body, that's just going to seem like a wacky position to most people, right? And that's the extent of it. To ask some follow-up question like, is it false, is just missing the point of the whole dialogue process.
But I guess I just don't get it, right? If somebody said, if they were confronted with a person who was missing an arm, and normally they don't think it's right to like kill people, but they don't know how they would react, right, if they encountered somebody who was missing an arm. Maybe they would think it was okay to kill them, right? And let's say I think that in that situation I wouldn't think it was okay. Why is that interesting?
Okay, so
they just have different moral values from me.
Right. So
what's interesting?
I didn't track every detail of the analogy there, but the thing that the whole sort of dialogue process and argument is ultimately doing is it's just teasing out what a view that's anti-vegan ultimately ends up saying, right? And just showing and just displaying that. And then the idea is that most people will not be comfortable with what these views say, right? So that's the extent of it.
This person.
Wait. So I'm just trying to understand. Let's just grant that for a second. Why would it need to do something beyond that, right? If the goal is just
I'm just trying to understand.
Right, well, one sec. I just don't want us to keep repeating the same thing. So I just want to make sure that you understand what the goal is, right? So if we all just have our own separate values, right, and we're trying to persuade other people, and show them if we want to show that a given position isn't reasonable, then it's good to develop some kind of tool or dialogue process that you can run when you're talking to people who hold
I don't know what you mean by unreasonable.
Out of line with what they value, right?
But
wait, but you're not letting me get my thoughts across. So just let me communicate here for a second, because when you talk, like I have ADD, when you start talking, I lose focus on what I'm trying to say. So we need to take turns. Okay, so why would it be wrong for the whole goal of the dialogue process to be simply to show the conclusions of a given view and with the idea in mind that when people see that conclusion, they will be unhappy and not align with the view? What would be wrong with just designing a tool for that purpose?
But the conclusions are not hidden. They're perspicuous.
Pardon me?
The conclusions are not hidden, they're perspicuous.
What's that supposed to mean?
Meaning, if I say I don't know how I would react in those situations, right? There's no mystery there that has to be teased out. Right? It's all on the surface.
Well, I don't know if I'd say there's a mystery, but if you tell me that you're uncertain about whether you would value a human with a single cow hair, again, like, I think you've just lost most people, and that's the whole purpose of the dialogue flow, is just to show that people who hold the Carnist position have views that most people would not align with.
Maybe somebody else here understands.
I'm not sure what you're struggling with. Like, let's try to clear it up, because I really don't think it's that confusing. Don't you think that it could be useful to have a tool that teases out the conclusions of views such that people can see that they don't agree with those views?
What?
Can you just, Jack? Can you just give an answer to that question? I don't want to be rude, but I've asked a lot of times.
I don't see how it's useful, because I don't see how there's anything that's hidden, right?
Wait, why would something being hidden being relevant to whether it's useful?
You said teased out.
Well, teased out doesn't.
Right?
Okay. Well, we have to be clear what we mean by hidden. Just not currently visible to people. Like, if that's the case, then you can say it's hidden.
Yeah, I don't see that there's anything, right, that's mysterious about the position where anything has to be teased out. I'm just not.
Oh, well, look, before I asked you if you had any idea where in the trait equalization process values lost, did I know the answer to that question?
No, but it doesn't matter.
No, so something was teased out. Well, I mean, Jack, it's as if every time I ask you a question, and where you know that the answering will grant me my case, you ask a question in response. So why don't you just why don't you just answer that? So you asked what there is to tease out, and I just told you. When I asked you about where in the trait equalization value is lost, and you gave an answer, do you think that I gained information by doing that? And if so,
in some trivial sense, maybe.
Wait. No. In some trivial sense, what's that supposed to mean? I gained information. I did not know what your position was before. I did know after. Therefore, I teased something out.
Did you find something out that affected whether you would accept my position or not?
Well, for me personally, no, because I already reject the position because of your view. Wait, stop, come on. I already reject the view because of your position on veganism, right? But to an observer who's currently not convinced of veganism, who's a carnist, right, and who thinks, maybe it's justifiable to eat meat, then sees that conclusion, they're going to go, well, that's a position that I can't take to defend that view. One down.
Wait, which part of my position do they?
I think most people would not take a position of being uncertain about the moral status of a human with a single cow hair.
Well, wait a minute. I just said that I wouldn't know how I would react in a case like that.
Right.
That's not taking a position.
Well, when I'm referring to your position... Okay, sorry, go ahead.
What my position is, right, is that it's okay, by my lights, right, to eat...
No, you got cut off there. Did you say more? Or
Sorry.
It's okay.
I said, what my position is that it's not okay to eat cows, and it's okay to eat human beings, right, by my lights.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody asks me, well, why are you willing to do that, right? It's not in virtue of anything further, right? It's just an irreducible property, right? Now,
but that's not the element I'm criticizing, but continue.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand, right? So if a person said, oh, well, that person doesn't know how he would react if he encountered a person who had one cow hair, right? How does that show that there's some kind of problem with them holding the same view as I do? I don't get it.
Well, okay, so the cow hair thing, that seems to me like in most people's eyes it would be crazy. So they wouldn't be comfortable holding a view where they say that they have no idea where in the trait equalization process value is lost.
You're not understanding what the...
Well, when I'm referring to the view, I'm referring to when you say that you're completely uncertain where in the trade equalization process value is lost. Wait, Jack. When you say you're unintentionally equivocating on view, right? What I'm referring to as the view is your position that you're uncertain where in the trade equalization process value is lost.
That's a distinct issue, right, from my view about whether it's okay to eat cows, right?
But this, when I say the view and I'm trying to show the problem, this is what I'm talking about.
That I epistemologically, as an individual, have some uncertainty, but some...
Yeah, so your view on the question of where in the trade equalization process value is lost, if your view on that question is, I have absolutely no idea, that has an implication that people won't accept.
I don't understand.
Well,
what is it that would make it the case, right, that I oughtn't to be uncertain about that? Is there some kind of like fact I can look for in the world?
No, I mean, what are you really, like, it's funny. Do you think that I'm so noob level that you're going to bait me into trying to argue for moral realism? I'm making a clear point, and it's like you're you're not really responding to it.
All right, look.
Well, I can keep walking you through it.
Well, you're not doing a good job. So
why don't we bring in another? Well, sure.
Is there anybody else here who understands the rationality of this procedure?
I would be very surprised. I would be very surprised if Jen didn't understand. So I'm curious what Jen has to say.
Well, I'm a little bit confused as to. It seems like Jack is saying, what he would think if confronted with that example is just irrelevant to sort of the force of the argument. But it sounds like you're saying that the person who hears him say that would say, oh, well, obviously it's so obvious, it shouldn't be a question of I have no idea, so that means their position's wrong, or it's not something I would take personally. Is that about right?
Generally. So the idea is, if we ask the question, if we start equalizing all the properties of an animal to a human, at what point is value lost? If someone's reply to that is, I have no idea, right? That's what I'm talking about as the position, right? So if we make it a proposition, the proposition would be, I have no idea, we could say, I have no idea where in the trade equalization process value is lost. That's a position that people would not agree with.
But I think Jack is just saying it's not really interesting on a moral anti-realist view that a bunch of other people might find it.
Well, let me talk to Jen for a second, because also it does interesting to him. I mean, that's kind of like beside the point. So the idea is the idea is just to show that the what Carnus positions end up saying is unpalatable to most people. Now, if I can ask a simple question about your Carnus position, and that's the answer you generate, that is going to, I mean, I don't really know what else to say. Like, that's going to look wacky to most people. Most people aren't going to accept that. So just talking to Jen for a second, does that answer your question, or is there something?
Oh wait, so where exactly is it problematic? Like, let's say we're using another example. This is somewhat analogous to when people use like Sorites examples, right? Where they'll be like, well, you know, where do we cut off what bald and not bald is? And someone can't give a concrete answer, and they're like, well, that's ridiculous, right? But I don't know if it's like, how is that supposed to, like, say you're talking to Jack, how is that supposed to convince Jack, for instance, that his position is problematic?
Wait, there's a problem with the question right there. So the goal isn't necessarily to convince the person who you're speaking to.
But then how is it an argument, though?
It's not an argument for veganism, right?
Well, firstly, it's not really an argument. It's more of like a dialogue process. There's yeah, and the idea is that people watching will find that pretty wacky. Like, just as
didn't I say that like a few weeks ago and you got mad at me?
Who is that? Do we know each other?
My name is Tiny Tofi.
Oh, I didn't even recognize your voice. I don't know what exactly you said or what I said to it, but I just want to, one second. So with Jen, so surely first of all, you would agree I assume that it's wacky to say that you are uncertain about the moral status of a human with a single cow hair. And by wacky, I mean, like, presumably that's not a view that you hold.
Whether or not it's okay to kill them?
Yeah, I mean, I take you to be a normal human being who would say that if there's a human out there who has a single cow hair, that doesn't suddenly make it fine to kill them.
I mean, on my own intuition, sure,
Yes,
but I'm
right.
sure that's fine.
Right, and do you think most people probably share that intuition?
Possibly.
And do you think that if I can show that someone's position cuts against that intuition, then all of the people who have that intuition are going to be unhappy with their position?
But but what I'm confused by here is it seems like Jack is saying something a little bit different, though. It's not that he's saying he has no idea. Like, if he saw someone, I think it sounds like he's saying he needs to see it to have a view on it. He has no moral perception of it currently.
Well, the question I asked was just whether he has any clue at all where in the trade equalization process value is lost. And I mean, it's fine to say, like, you can say whatever you want. If you want to say, I have no idea, I need to see it to know, you're free to say that, right? But I think that seems wacky to most people.
But
I mean,
there's you can still coherently say no and still, like, for instance, if I ask you, at what point does someone stop being tall? That doesn't mean you wouldn't know if someone who's 7 foot tall is tall, right? You can still say, okay, that person's tall, but it's when you get closer and closer is when you're like, I don't know where the cutoff is exactly.
Right. No, it's okay. So you don't need to have some exact perfect threshold. It's not like you have to like solve the what do you call it? Sororities?
Sorority.
So the idea isn't to pinpoint some exact threshold, like down to the molecular level or something. It could be that you answer a question of this sort with a gray area. Like, you know, if I ask you if I like trade equalize like a normal adult to a baby, and I ask, you know, at what point they lose, like, in your view, they should lose the right to drive. If you say you have no idea at all, that's going to look crazy, right? Because it's obvious that like an infant shouldn't be able to drive. But if you say, you know, I'm not sure the exact point, but it's like, you know, somewhere between maybe like 14 and 20, that's going to look like a lot less crazy, right? And
right. So like,
yeah.
Which one is Jack saying?
Well, I asked him if he has any idea whatsoever where value's lost, and he said no. So I take it to be the case that he's saying, that he's saying just that he has no idea.
But I don't understand why it should matter, right? So
Well,
if a person says there's, you know, it starts to get gray for me around here, right? What does that change?
well, the
'Cause
challenge.
I don't understand what the disagreement is, right? You're saying, oh, I disagree with you, right? That if a person had a cow hair, right? I disagree with you that would be like within the gray area, right?
Yeah, that would seem very wacky.
Yeah, but the point is, that's just an epistemic issue, right? The person is just saying, well, I don't really know where I would draw the line, right? And somebody else is saying, I know where I would draw the line, right?
I think
What I'm trying to understand is, why is that interesting?
So the reason that it would be interesting, now I don't know what could ever be interesting to you. I don't think it is interesting to you. The reason why it's interesting to me is because if we can ask these kind of questions and show that you have a position that most people don't resonate with, they're not going to want to hold the same position.
Yeah, but what does it mean? Not want to hold the same epistemic position?
No,
Or
just
not
the
wanna
same
hold
the same set of values.
Wait a minute. I don't understand, right, what it means to not want to hold the values that you hold exactly. Right?
Someone could see what your values ultimately are and say, well, I don't agree. I don't hold the same values.
Yeah, but I don't understand. They
And
presumably already have values with respect to that issue, right?
So the idea, I feel like I was making almost more progress when I was talking to Jen, although I'm happy to go back to talking to you.
Well, no, you can go back to talking to him.
Well, yeah, because I think that we're almost reaching understanding there. So, Jen, you understand that the idea here. Oh, sorry, that's my phone. The idea here is to just show that these positions that support carnism tend to have conclusions that people are not satisfied with. That is like that's the purpose generally of the argument. Do you follow that and see why that would be a valuable thing to do?
I understand what you're saying. As for whether it's valuable or not, I guess that's more debatable, because I think a lot of times people are coming up with rationalizations post hoc, right? They're not doing it. The reason when you give the NTT and they give an explanation, a lot of time that's not the reason they actually meet, right? That's just something they came up with, or that's how I'll justify it. So even if you tear, or you show that it entails some strange absurdity or whatever, I don't know if that's actually going to help that much, but I think it's a different question.
Or when you say help, do you mean to persuade the person who's being spoken to?
Well, presumably, right? That's what I assume.
Oh, no. So very often when you're having this conversation, the person you're talking to is just going to be, like, really dogmatic. Like, the people who get into... Like, I mean, sometimes you can show someone where their own position leads. Like, they'll say something like, oh, well, I think that value drops off below a certain intelligence threshold. Then you point to a human below that threshold, and they go, well, wait, actually, I must not think that value drops off at that point. And you can sometimes get someone to reevaluate their moral position like that. But the thing that was kind of lacking in what you just said is that the goal doesn't just have to be to persuade the person you're talking to. The goal can also be to persuade the people who are listening.
Yeah, but so, like, suppose no one was listening, right? You were just having a one-on-one conversation with Jack.
Oh, right, but
the conversation would just be over then, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if I were talking to someone like Jack, and it just became clear after talking for a bit that, like, they're comfortable with whatever kind of reductio we can get on the position, even if everyone else would be uncomfortable with it, they're comfortable with it. I mean, there's not going to be much room for persuasion there.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not fully seeing, I suppose, where the exact issue is with Jack's specific position, just that.
When you say issue, are you thinking like a logical problem?
Well, no, not a logical problem. It can be any sort of problem.
Right. So
it's like an unintuitive result of his position.
So, for example, would you consider it to be a problem if in his position there was some kind of moral evaluation that you disagree with?
Can you be more specific?
Yeah, I mean, he says X is fine and you think X is wrong.
Well, I mean, obviously I would just disagree with him, right?
Mm-hmm. But that could be the extent of the issue that we're trying to show, right? So a position that from the start doesn't seem obviously disagreeable to someone listening in from the outside, like, oh, okay, he's okay with eating meat, he's not okay with, like, eating humans or something, seems reasonable enough. The idea is that by, like, exploring it, you can actually find that it probably has other consequences that you wouldn't be comfortable with. So someone who's watching from the start and thinks, those starting points seem reasonable enough, like it's okay to kill animals, it's not okay to kill humans, by teasing out what the view actually says, by asking some of these questions, you could show that it says something that person is in fact not comfortable with, and then they would not align with the view.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so you can understand that being the purpose of the argument.
But it's not an argument, though.
Or, well, I shouldn't call it an argument. I should call it a dialogue process.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems to me that your point convince not necessarily always the person, sometimes just people listening, and just based on some sort of whatever values or intuitions or whatever they hold. It just like in terms of you have the entity written as an argument too, right?
Yeah, the argument, though,
what is
that
meant to demonstrate?
So the argument is when someone tries to give a particular answer. Some people don't understand that this answer produces a contradiction, so the argument is there to show that it does. So sometimes people will say humans have value, animals don't have value, and there's no point in the trade equalization process where value is lost. So the argument just shows that that view produces a contradiction.
Right.
Wait,
Pardon?
I'm
Yeah,
not.
go ahead,
I'm not
Jeff.
under.
What?
Oh, you cut out.
Can anyone else hear him?
No, I
Nope.
can't hear him.
Well, I guess we'll wait for him to get to a better Wi-Fi zone or whatever. But just continuing with Jen, because it seems like we were getting somewhere. So you can, I don't understand, because you sound a bit apprehensive, but I'm not sure what is what's weird to you here. So like, you could just have a dialogue process where the goal is just to tease out the conclusions of positions, such that people can see whether they would agree with those positions or not.
Yeah, no, that part is totally fine. I have no issue with that.
Okay.
I think I think it seems to me that as an actual argument, which I know it's not meant to be like an argument, but as an actual one-to-one argument, seems not, I wouldn't say lacking, but it seems like it doesn't have as much force when someone just comes up with, oh well, just a brute fact or whatever they come up with.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no moral argument that you're going to be able to make to someone who, holds a given position and just accepts all of the consequences of that position, right? So I think that you're unintentionally like setting a bar for the argument that I've never set for. Well, I mean, again, I should call it argument and dialogue flow process, but you're setting a bar for name the trait that I'm not setting. And that would seem to me as like a non-realist, like a wacky bar to set. The idea doesn't have to be that you can like run this dialogue flow process and then by the end, like any person is going to be like, oh, well, I should obviously become vegan. You can just create a tool that's going to be, more or less effective at showing the disagreeable aspects of positions so that others can understand if they would hold that position or not. Or if you have an interlocutor who, like, sometimes you can persuade the interlocutor. That happens often, actually. Like, there's street activists who will use the argument. Or sometimes I'll talk to someone, and kind of like I described before, maybe they'll give some kind of trait initially. They'll be like, oh, they taste good, right? They'll say that's the point in the trade equalization process where value is lost is where the being in question tastes good. And it's like, okay, so wait, you're saying that if humans tasted good, it would be fine to eat them? And then they'll go, oh, well, I mean, no, that actually, and then you can say, well, then it can't be that value is lost just where the being in question is tasty, right? So sometimes the person who you're speaking to will have a change of values by seeing where their position leads. Sometimes they won't. But I think in all cases, if you have like a kind of just a general audience that's like just a sample of the general population, the carnist views you'll be able to show have conclusions that most people aren't happy with. And that can just be the extent of what the tool is for. Do you see like a problem with any of that?
No. Again, I don't have an issue with using it as a tool like that. I don't think Jack would have an issue with it either.
I don't know if I'd speak for him there. He seems like he does.
I don't know if he's back or not, but
Yeah, I'm
Jack,
here.
are you there? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm.
just
cut out again.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It was like the second you started talking, you're like, yeah, I'm here. So you're gone.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to understand, right? So let's go back to the baldness case, right? If I say, I think this guy is bald, and this person is not bald, right? And somebody else says, well, I don't draw the line there, right? What is the revision supposed to be?
What do you mean by the revision?
Well, they're saying that person has different ideas about what baldness is than I do, right? So am I supposed to say, oh, I just...
You cut out, you said, am I supposed to say I just... Maybe he's out around or something. Like, does he Discord when he's outside doing stuff?
Oh yeah, I'm outside. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. You're just cutting out a lot. You asked about what the revision is supposed to be. What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah. So.
Oh, it's so bad. It's like every time he like enthusiastically starts a sentence with "yeah, so," it just goes completely silent.
Sorry.
It's okay.
First, I think part of the problem is that there's a glitch on push to talk in the latest update, or one of the latest updates. So the person says I don't really have settled views as to where I would draw the line as to what counts as baldness and what doesn't count as baldness, right? And so somebody says, well, I think this person is bald and this person is not bald, right? But the first person doesn't agree, right? What exactly is what is this kind of procedure supposed to do in a case like that, right?
Just let me make sure I understand the case. The case is you draw some line about baldness. The other person doesn't agree with your line about where baldness starts or stops, and then the question is, what are you therefore supposed to do in light of the fact that they don't agree with where you draw the line on baldness?
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand is like.
Right. Okay. So if that's the question, I think that you just are like, it's like you have a different idea of what the argument is. Like, again, I shouldn't call it an argument, because there is a part of it that's an argument, but it's like a dialogue process. I think you have a wrong understanding of what the tool is supposed to do. Like, do you think that it's supposed to be the case that anyone who you run this dialogue process on is supposed to, by the end, come to the conclusion that they ought go vegan? Like, is that what you think the tool is supposed to do?
Well, see, what I was imagining was that here we have a position, right? That the reason why that somebody offers that the reason why it's okay to eat cows, right, is because of some irreducible property, right? And the reason why it's not okay to eat humans is because of some irreducible property. Now imagine that there are like 1,000 people with that position, right? Now then you run this dialogue, and each one of them draws the line in what you're calling the trait equalization process in a different place, all across the spectrum, right? Now what is it that the bystander, I'm just not understanding what the aim is with respect to the bystander, right? The bystander presumably doesn't have settled views about whether it's okay to eat meat or not, right?
Not necessarily. They might have settled views. Like, they might be convinced currently that it's fine.
But presumably not by appeal to that justified?
I don't understand what you mean, sorry.
Well, the justification given by these 1,000 people is all the same, right? It's that there's an irreducible property, right? Now, I take it you're not saying there's anything wrong with the property being irreducible, right? Like, you're not saying that's some kind of unreasonable position to hold.
It doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
Yeah. So you're not trying to convince the person that it's unreasonable for them to think that the reason why it's okay to eat things in some cases and not in others is ultimately going to be something irreducible. Well, that's not what you're trying to convince.
No. The aim of the argument is certainly not to show that, like, saying that values are, like, irreducible is some kind of problem or something. Is that what you thought the aim of the argument is to do? Or the dialogue process is to do?
No. I'm trying to rule out what the possibilities.
Well,
I'm trying to rule out things that are not the aim of the argument.
Well, wait, but when you say
out what the
right, so I don't know. It sounds so weird when you say, like, I'm trying to, by process of elimination, find out what the dialogue process could possibly be trying to do when I've told you what it's trying to do. Jen seemed to understand what I was talking about. Jen, do you want to try to relay?
Let me try explaining it. Let me try having a discussion with Jen. So, let's say we have, out of that 1,000 people, right, somebody gets very close, is at the furthest extreme, right, where it's only if there's like this tiny bit of humanness that remains, that it's okay to eat the human, right? Now, at both extremes, out of the 1,000 people, right, everybody's appealing to the same rationale, right? They're just saying that in the trade equalization, right, they draw the line at a different place, right? Now, presumably, the outcome is not supposed to be the bystander, that he should be convinced that it's irreducible, right? The aim of the dialogue is to try to convince them that they should actually include human beings in that set, right? So the question is, what is it that they're appealing to, right, in the case of that most extreme case, that is supposed to prompt them to do that?
So I don't know if you're talking to me or Jen. Are you trying to talk to me or to Jen?
That was to Jen.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding this right, essentially, so use like, maybe not the bald analogy, but say the tall analogy, and I want to say, everyone is tall, and you say, well, okay, what, in virtue of what do you decide this? And I say, oh, just some irreducible property. Or let me put it this way. I say some people above some height are tall, and everyone else isn't. And you say, well, in virtue of what is that the case? And I say it's irreducible. And so you just run the same thing and you say, well, there must be some cutoff, right? And I say, well, okay, I'll set it here. And then I can just say, well, if we added if we subtracted 1 nanometer from it, surely that's ridiculous. Therefore, your position is ridiculous too. And we can do that for any position, any cutoff for whatever we decide. It sounds like you're saying that regardless of, we had a bunch of people and we asked them, where do you put the cutoff? And they all gave different answers. Then what are we supposed to do once, say, someone from far away is watching all of this? What are they supposed to glean from the fact that there's a bunch of different cutoffs that are seemingly just mind-dependent moral evaluations from each specific person? Like, what are they supposed to learn from that?
Yeah, because the point is they presumably have intuitions to begin with, right, when considering those cases. So why would encountering the fact that other people have different intuitions from them, why would we think that in some way is supposed to move them to like revise their moral intuitions?
Well, I think in this case it might just be, I think Ass might just say that it might not have been, they might have not really thought about it as much as they should have. And so once they see these cutoffs,
Yes.
they think, well, this is male. I won't include these people. I won't include these people. They'll just sort of better evaluate their own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I don't know if that's what, I don't know if
That is
agree
the
with
idea.
that.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, but you can do that with an imaginary, you don't need a real interlocutor.
Well, yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, you could just say, well, what if the person said this? What if the person said this? What if the person said this, right?
Yeah, you
Sure.
could do it with, I mean, it seems like you could say that about a ton of like any discussion. You could always like play the role of the other guy.
No, but the point is, if you're not trying to convince your interlocutor, right?
Well,
that
to be
he ought
clear,
to
well,
revise.
just one sec. To be clear, I am happy if the interlocutor becomes convinced, but it's not necessarily like the goal or something that the interlocutor always be persuaded. There's some people who aren't persuadable on like any given moral question.
But what about not like, let's not limit this to people who are unpersuadable. Say like a perfectly rational agent, someone who's not like clinging on to something. Can you rationally, not necessarily a priori, but just like sort of with just some sort of argument or whatever, the quasi argument, convince them from just based on their own moral intuition. It just seems impossible, right?
Sorry, convince. I don't totally understand the question. Pardon?
So, like, suppose you were trying to, like, ideally, let's say, suppose you're talking to some guy and they're not really, like, you know how some people are just super committed, they won't change their mind. They're an ideal, rational person, and you're trying to show them, say they hold Jacks to you, and you say, well, there's this issue with it. And they say, well, so what? That's fine within my moral intuition. It just seems...
Well, it seems like ideally rational is probably still compatible with whatever values, right? Like, are we taking that to be the case?
Well, I suppose it depends on what you take values to be, but I mean, sure.
Because yeah, if you can have an ideally rational person with any values, then it might not persuade them depending what their values are.
Well, I mean, not any value.
Like the whole idea. Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say the whole idea is like we have some idea about what people's values are and what kind of things they will and won't be comfortable with. If we were in a radically different world, we might not be able to use this kind of tool. In this world, it seems to do work, right? But it could, if you could come up with some possible world where people have like really different intuitions about morality, and it would be less effective or not effective.
Sure. Wait, so Jack, where exactly was the issue again? In terms of, I think, since Ask said it's not necessarily about the interlocutor, where would your issue be?
Well, no, because I was just, when he said, well, what if I changed, just one hair to a hair, right? It doesn't seem like there's any need to ask me that question, right? Because I might say, I don't know at that point.
So like, sorry to cut off. So like, here's a good example, just so you can get some insight into the world that I operate in and why this is useful, okay? So there's a well-known YouTuber. He's got, I think, like 500,000 subscribers, whose name is Hunter Avalone, right? And I'm sure, like you, Jack, as someone who I believe is pretty firmly like a left-winger, would probably really not like this guy's politics, like political YouTuber. But anyway, this guy's down to have a discussion about veganism. Now, I'll end up running this process, right? And I can tell you that some amount of people in his audience, like, he's going to end up generating some kind of answer that has really wacky conclusions. Like, when he's going to say the point in the trade equalization process is like when it's not human or something, and we're going to get some crazy reductio about like killing beings that are just subjectively identical to humans but have different shells around them or something like this. Now, a large chunk of people in his audience are going to go, well, that's an insane position. I definitely, and again, insane just means out of line with their values. I don't agree with that. I've got to reevaluate what I think. I think I might need to find a position that actually makes sense to me here, right? So the idea is there's some kind of, like, if you view like increasing veganism in the world as a good thing, there's some kind of pragmatic utility to a tool like this, and that's just an instance of it. Does that seem like clear to everybody?
Yeah, that was clear to me before. Although I think I came into it assuming that it was meant to be an argument, but I mean.
Yeah, well, the confusion is that there's part of it that's an argument, but the only part that's actually like a syllogism is the part that's designed for like when someone tries to give a particular answer, where they say humans have values, animals don't, and there's no point in the trade equalization process where values lost. Like, to anyone who's probably like spent time with like philosophy or logic or whatever, it's going to be obvious that that just is not coherent. But a lot of people actually try to say that, right? When you actually interact with like the general public, you get that. So it's good to just have a clear argument where you can just show why that produces a contradiction in a nice, clear way, right? So there is part that's a syllogism, but it's not like the whole all of Name the Trade is a syllogism. It's kind of like a dialogue process, and there's a syllogism that comes up at one point if certain conditions are met.
Yeah, and so in terms of like what Jack said, suppose he said, I think this is what he said. He said he doesn't know. There's just some point where in this, trade equalization, the irreducible fact, and it might be different irreducible facts for different stages, but I mean, regardless,
sure,
there's some point where there's just no thing, and he just doesn't know where it is exactly.
Yeah, if you say that you have absolutely no idea, the reductio is that apparently you're uncertain if value's lost when we're talking about a human with a single cow hair.
Well, I mean, we don't have to. We can reduce it a little. It doesn't have to be the extreme sides, right? Just somewhere like where, at what, like, say there's a torso or a brain of a cow or the head of a cow and a human body or something.
Right, but
maybe in those cases he might be more.
but
Not sure, but suppose
okay.
he did say that. Like, I just don't see what benefit or what like idea we would like appeal to convince the onlooker that, oh, this position is ridiculous.
Well, I think the position being that I'm uncertain where value's lost at all, the thing that would persuade people that that's a wacky view to hold is just showing a being who's extremely close to a human, who they, by that logic, are uncertain about the value of.
Well, let's not say it all. Let's just say there's a gray area somewhere in the middle.
But that's slightly different. So before we go to that, can we just understand that with the I have absolutely no clue where value's lost, there's an unpalatable conclusion there to like virtually everybody.
Well, I don't know if Jack would agree with that.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with that, assuming we allow extreme cases like a human who has one, cow hair.
Yeah, I mean, like, it can be, you can make it like one cow, like a patch of cow skin or something. Like, I don't know, it can be more than a hair. But, like, the point is, if you have,
sure.
Like, I don't, maybe that's the difference between some insanely microscopic change and one that's a bit bigger is, like, meaningful to you in some way that I'm not appreciating. Like, okay, but...
No, it's fine.
But, like, the idea is just if you have absolutely no clue, there's just, like, a massive amount of beings we could pick that just are obviously going to have value to everyone who's watching. And if you say you don't have any idea if they have value, that's where they say, well, then your answer to that question just seems bad to me. Like, I can't get on board with that.
Well, yeah, that's fine.
Right. So, what's...
Although, I'm not... Looking back, I'm not... Well, I don't know if Jack's still in here, but... Yeah, he is. Or wait, Jack, were you saying this in a kind of, like when sometimes people will say things like when they're talking about counterfactuals, they'll say something like, "Oh, well, if this happened, then this would have happened." And some people are like, not fictionalists about it, but they're really just skeptical they have any epistemic access to what they would feel like given this counterfactual. Is that kind of what you were saying, or are you just saying straight up like, "Oh, if someone came up to me and they were all human aside from like one, skin cell of a cow, then I would have no idea like if I should kill them or not"?
Well, no, I'm just sort of not really seeing what turns on that, because presumably there's going to be some point at which somebody is going to say something. I would draw the line here where it's presumably not going to be wacky, as Isaac put it, for the vast majority of viewers, right?
Yeah.
Wait, did you just presume that there's a line you can draw that won't be wacky for most people?
Oh, yeah.
Why would you? Well, I'm very skeptical of that. Why would you make that assumption?
Because I think that the number of people who don't have a problem eating meat is like vast.
Right, but you could say that about anything that was like normal at some point in history. Like it's not clear to me at all that there's actually like some kind of answer you can give to that question about where value's lost that's going to be satisfactory to most people. Now, we don't have data on how most people react, so no one's going to be able to like win that, but I'm just planting a flag there that, I mean, I tend more to think that there probably isn't even a line that people would be happy with. I think that every attempt to draw a line seems to make people uncomfortable. And saying I don't even know where the line is seems to make people uncomfortable too.
But trade equalization isn't a line though, right?
The process isn't a line? Like the process is not a line.
Because it's not a linearly ordered thing, right? So like certain you can swap traits in different orders, right? So in one sequence, that's down the line, that's okay, but then in a different sequence, that's where it becomes okay, and so forth.
Yeah. Well, like, are you just asking it like if the order that you alter traits in matters?
Well, no, I'm just saying it's not one line. It's actually many different lines.
What do you mean?
'Cause
It's
you,
many
like
different
suppose
lines.
I said like I can't say like if
Oh, you mean?
suppose
Sorry, I
it's-
think I might understand. Actually, are you saying that the same person who has one view about, like, let's say that they just think value is lost when intelligence is lost? Are you saying that that's technically a massive amount of lines because based on how we order the trait equalization process, that point could be at different places?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's just that when we talk about there being line, it seems like you're asking for a example of like the creature or whatever that would be at that line, but it seems like we can have multiple lines where if what I think is most important is, like you said, intelligence, then I can have many different iterations of this different things. That as long as the intelligence thing is, the intelligence factor is right, all of those are the lines, right? But there's not one specific thing that's the line.
I'm not totally sure if I'm following. I guess it's just the language. I don't know what you mean when you're saying this thing is the line. Like, what do you mean exactly?
Like, so like let's say in the example of the you and Jack were using, give me an example of where I could draw the line.
You could draw the line at, like, an IQ of 75 or something.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're talking about one specific we're talking about one specific trait, right? But in Jack's case, the trait was just some irreducible thing, so we have to appeal to not a trait but some iteration of a human/cow, right?
I don't know that he said that the trait is irreducible. I think that he said that his valuing of something is irreducible. Like the value itself is irreducible. Am I not understanding him right?
I thought Jack was saying just the trait was just that it's okay to eat it, and there's no further facts to the matter.
That's right.
Well, no. By the trait, what we mean by the trait is the point in the trait equalization process where value is lost.
Well, okay, so like under Jack's view, like we couldn't give me an example of what you think were a possible line, because we can't appeal to
you could say
intelligence.
So one view that you could give would be that it's like an intelligence thing.
But that's not what he's saying, though, right?
I didn't say that that's what he's saying.
But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm asking, like, given his view, what's an example of a line you could draw?
Oh, he doesn't appear to be drawing a line. I'm
like in principle, I mean.
Well, what I'm not totally sure I'm following what you're saying. What I understand him to be saying is that he just doesn't know where value drops off.
Yeah, but like suppose he could give you a line, right? What would be an example of the line? Because I'm just trying to explain what I meant by multiple lines.
Intelligence below a certain level.
But but intelligence, he's not appealing. The trait he's talking about doesn't appeal to other traits. There's no further fact to the matter, right? It's a brute fact.
Well, by a line, what I mean is like the point in the trait equalization process where value is lost.
Yeah, but he just said that the value is lost based on this irreducible trait. So wherever that's lost,
right.
No
so
right?
Is the view just that we don't like it? It seems like it's either the case that we know where value is lost or we don't know where it's lost. So is the view just saying we don't know where it's lost?
Well, no. I mean, he could be saying that, but I don't.
You're trying to index where it's lost by the property that's being dropped, but the point is that Jack is not referencing any other property. So you need to index it by the creature that is there.
Well, wait.
Exactly.
Wait. But then there's just not an answer to the question of at what point it's lost
Well,
in that process.
Well, there could be. It just have to be. It wouldn't be one line. It would be like many lines.
I'm not sure I follow that. So just to make sure we're on the same page. So if the question is at what point in the trait equalization at what point in the trait equalization process value is lost? Are we getting an answer to that, or is it like not an answer to that?
I mean, we could, like, suppose we had a sort of an infinite, not necessarily infinite, like countably infinite set of all the different iterations of swapping between humans and cows, and then I, given sort of infinite amount of time, go through each one and say, oh, this one has value, this one doesn't have value. And the point there is that there's no line per se I'm drawing. It's more so that I'm just going through and saying this one brutally does have value, this one doesn't have value, and so forth.
So is the view that there's like I guess I'm just not clear what it's supposed to be saying. So like if there is a line, I'm just wondering what the line is, and if
Okay,
there's
let me put it this way. When we talk about a line, what axis are we looking at when we're talking about the line? So, like, if we were talking about intelligence, you'd say, okay, we're cutting off at 75 IQ, right?
Yeah.
But Jack's thing is that it's just some irreducible trait, so we just cut it off based on our mind-dependent assessment of where it stops being, morally valuable or whatever.
Right, and are we able to get any like account of where that is, or from our perspective, do we just have no clue where he draws that line?
Well, I mean, you have to ask Jack that, but I mean, I don't know if that's super relevant in the sense that
it's relevant to the dialogue process, because if we have no idea where that line is drawn, then we're back to a position where, from our perspective, we can't tell what the view says about a being who's just like one step into the process.
Well, okay, just to make this easier, let's just say Jack, on a case-by-case basis, because he's a particularist, right, can tell you whether it has value or not. So if you give him the example of the human with the one hair of a cow, he'll be like, no, that is value. But then if you go further into like middling territory, then you'll be like, well, no, that one doesn't, so forth.
So on that view, what's the answer to the question like meant to be?
Sorry, say that again?
So like the question about where value is lost, on that view, do we just not know where value is lost?
Well, the point is there's not one line where it's lost, right?
What do you mean when you say there's not one line where it's lost?
Because the only way that works is if there's one specific variable we're using the axis for. So when we're talking about just strictly intelligence, then there is clearly a line. Anything below 75 is not morally valuable. Anything above is, right?
I think there might be some kind of confusion. So by the line, like all we mean is like we have all the properties of the animal, and we have all the properties of the human, and we start changing the human's properties to match the animal, and we're just asking, what has to be changed before value goes away.
Well, yeah, but I understand that. But what I'm saying is that in this case, there's not one thing that would have to be changed.
Yeah, it could be more than one thing. That's fine.
Well, no, not it's. What I mean to say is that it's not.
There's no one
axis.
property.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be one property. It could be like multiple
properties. There's not even a set of properties. It's more like there's, depending on what let's call it a creature or whatever, the human cow we create on a case by case basis. Some have some moral value and some don't.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's no hard line where we can say anything below this property or this set of properties or whatever does have moral value and this one doesn't.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it could be like maybe there's like, if we set up some equalization, it could be like, oh, it's lost here and then it's regained and then it's lost or something. We're just wondering if you can give an account of a place where it's lost in the in that process.
It's just a brute fact. I'm sorry to interject, but it would just be some...
Yeah, just some brute fact, right?
Right, well, but wait, so when I ask the question, at what point is value lost, am I given information that I'm able to tell where the point is, or I just don't know from my perspective?
But that's the point. There's no one point there, right? We just agreed, right?
I don't know if I understand what you're saying when you say that.
Okay, so if I'm saying, if we're doing we're looking at 2 dimensions, right? And I want to know some shade, what values for x and y are below some value of x and y, some shaded area exists. I can't just tell you where the x value below it, where it's shaded. I have to also give you the y. And similarly, we have multiple dimensions. You can't just give one place where one line where there's sort of below this is a no value, this and above it is there is value. You have to do multiple dimensions, right?
Again, I'm not sure if I'm understanding, but I don't see how it really like poses any kind of problem. Like, it's either that I'm given some kind of account of where the value's lost or I'm not. And like, all I want to understand is like where in that process it goes away. Because it must go away at least once at some point in that process, right?
Well, yeah, he could just trivially give you like really obvious examples, right? Like if, like the example you gave up, the one hair, you'd be like, yeah, that still has value.
Yeah, so we're looking for the example like closest to a human, right? So like
Closest to a
yeah.
human?
So like if we start modifying the human, I guess I'm
Yeah.
just not there's something that I think we're like talking past each other with here. So like let me just make sure that we agree with the same thing. So like we agree that there must be a point where value is lost, right? We agree that somewhere in the process of equalizing traits, value is lost.
At least one, not necessarily
Yes.
just one, but yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So then I want to know what that point is. Yeah, so that's the question. And then are we given like an account of where that is, or are we not given an account of where that is?
But the point is that it doesn't seem like on the particulars account that you do need to give an account.
Well, need is a weird word. Like,
Okay. Well, let me put it different. There's on Jack's account, it sounds like there's many sort of dimensions and different lines, and so there isn't one thing you can just appeal to and say, "Oh, this is where the line is," right? Because they're just brute fact. So if you could give an account, then they wouldn't be brute facts anymore because they would be in virtue of something else, right? So if he said, "Oh, well, the line is when the cow has this property," then that's the moral value is intrinsically tied to that property, so it can't be brute anymore, right?
It seems to me that it still has to be the case for any being in that process that it either has value or it doesn't have value, right?
Well, no, yeah, we're granting that, but it's just the reasons is there's no further fact of the matter, just brutally why at one point it's like when we talk about the Sorites paradox. Some people will say, "Here's the line," and people will say, "Okay, well, why?" And they say, "Oh, there's no reason. It's just a brute fact. That's where we're drawing the line." And similarly, you might say, "Oh, all of these on the left they do have moral value, and all of these on the right don't." And you say, "Well, why? Why are you drawing the line there?" He's like, "Oh, just a brute fact."
Okay, so, okay, wait. Now I see the conclusion. So we're not asking why you're drawing the line there. We're just trying to understand where the line is.
Well, I mean, why does it matter though, right? If it's just a brute fact, it could be.
Because
like, suppose he just said, like, not including extreme examples, so obviously then someone might be like, "Wait, that's a little weird." But suppose he just said,
I can
somewhere
answer
like
that.
in the
Yeah.
middle.
Well, wait. So you asked. I almost forgot what you said. You asked something like, why would that matter? Well, the whole idea is that like asking them to draw the line. It's their attempts to do that lead to them like giving positions that most people are not aligned with. So that's like the point of it. Yeah.
I agree with extreme examples, but like suppose Jack says, "Oh, it's somewhere like in the middle gray area." I just haven't really, you'd have to give me a case by case example, and I'll tell you. That doesn't seem anything ridiculous about that on first glance, right?
Yeah, I just wouldn't know what exactly is being said there. Like, I would just kind of ask him if he could spell it out at all. Like, does he have any idea where it is?
That's the point. You can't spell it out.
Well, if he can't spell it out at all, then we're so it's
because there's not one point, right? It's not like one thing we can appeal to and say, "Here's the line."
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like are you thinking that the view has to be like universalist or something?
No. Like let me use the classic example. You're definitely familiar with it for the particularists, right? If I said, clearly there's take this unfunny joke and this funny one, and there has to be some, point. I don't know how you trait equalize jokes, but suppose you could. There must be some point where this becomes funny. Just because you can't tell me exactly where it is doesn't mean anything, right?
No, but I think that the kind of thing you're asking them to draw a line with respect to is actually relevant. So I think there's cases where not being able to draw the line doesn't have like any weird impact on people's intuitions. And I think there's other cases where it seems really wacky. So if you say, I don't know when exactly this joke would stop becoming funny, it could be that that's a case where most people are going to go, oh, that doesn't seem too weird. If you say, I don't have any idea in this process where value's lost, that could have implications that actually are weird for people. So the thing we're actually trait equalizing is relevant there.
Yeah, I just don't see in the middling case where he says some gray area in the middle, why that would be unintuitive.
Well, to me, I can't really say anything about it until I know what the view is saying. So, like, what I would ask is, do you have, like, any idea at all? Could you give me a rough idea of where that point is? Now, if they can't give any idea at all, that's where we're just like, okay, well, I can't even tell, according to their view, if it's wrong to kill a human with, like, one animal skin cell or whatever your example was. But if they can give, like, some kind of account, even, like, a rough account, of where the gray area starts, then that's what I would want to hear.
Yeah, I think I'm not fully seeing how that just wouldn't be compatible with Jack's view, right? Because then it wouldn't be a brute fact.
Well, wait, so I mean, I don't know that I understand the details of Jack's view, but it's like the way I'm looking at it is like there's questions that one either like can answer or can't answer, and like if you give a certain answer to them, there's certain implications, and if you don't give an answer, there's certain implications. So like the implication of saying I have absolutely no idea where value's lost, we've like been through that already. And then if you give any kind of specific idea of where value's lost, there's going to be like specific implications to those answers. And if you just try to be like vague about it and just say, oh, it's lost somewhere, that's just going to be a situation where I would seek more clarity about what you're saying.
But I mean, no,
if
go
I may
ahead.
interject. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Well, what I'm not getting is this. Let's say he draws a line somewhere, right? And then you point out some unintuitive fact about it, right? You can just then brutally say, well, okay, then those unintuitive facts, now they're part of the new line. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he can always just do that. So to account for any unintuitive facts, if that makes any sense.
I'm not sure that I follow. Are you just saying if I show an uncomfortable position, he can just move the line?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
then
exactly
we just like rerun the process. And if you do that like 10 times and they keep just giving lines that have really bad conclusions, then people are going to go, I don't think I can get on board with like any of this guy's attempts to draw the line at all.
Wait, but each line is only going to work in the case that it works.
What do you mean when you say that?
Like you can't. There's no universal line, so you keep keep running it. It doesn't matter, right?
No. What Quick Brown Fox was saying is that the person who's drawing the line, once they see the conclusion of the line, they actually change where the line is. So the idea is if they.
The point is.
The idea is just if they change their position, then you would just start over. You would just ask again.
But I don't think it's more they're changing their position. I just think they're saying, well, this specific thing, the reason it might be this is the line here.
Wait, I think there's a misunderstanding. Quick Brown Fox is talking about someone actually changing their position. He's talking about them giving one answer for where the line is, and then upon seeing some consequence of drawing the line, they're actually changing where they think the line is. Is that not correct, Quick Brown Fox?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, wherever he talks about this, like, a line maybe is not the right example, but like, each particular case, I think that's the best way of putting it. If there's a particular case which I left out that's unintuitive, I can just put that particular case into the whichever side, value or non-value.
Well, it sounded to me, what I understood you to be saying was that someone gives you some account of where the line is, you show them some kind of conclusion to drawing the line there, they actually find the conclusion unpalatable, and then they change their account of where the line is. That's what I took you to be saying.
I think he's just saying that the line for the particular case, and then you find
what do you mean? Sorry, the line. Wait. When you say there's just language that doesn't make sense there. When you say the line for the particular case, what we're talking about with the line is the line as in the place in the trade equalization process where value is lost. That's what. So I don't know what you mean when you say the line for the particular case.
So we could have a bunch of different creatures that between cow and human that we might say are morally valuable, right?
Sure.
So I think he's saying you find one, like if somebody explains, well, this one is morally valuable, you can say, well, wait a second, this has X, Y, and Z properties, so if that's the line, then these aren't in. They could just say, well, no, it's not actually a matter of properties. We just include all these other creatures that we think intuitively might be
there's something really weird about
morally valuable.
There's something really weird about the framing there. Like, so, sorry, what's the answer that they give initially when you ask where in the trade equalization process value is lost?
I think they're just saying they don't know.
Yeah,
Wait.
so if they say that they have no clue at all, that's where we get that really strange conclusion where, okay, so if we have a being who's one step away from a human, you're not clear if that has value or not?
Well, but that doesn't follow from just saying I don't know where the line is.
If you say I have absolutely no idea where the line is, then you don't know if the line includes that being or not.
But you're just saying you don't know.
Wait,
I
sorry.
think
but
what Ask is saying.
Well, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna, it literally is entailed. If you say I have no clue at all, then for any being in that range, you don't know. But sorry, go ahead, Jen.
That's problematic because when you say no clue at all, it's not clear. If you said every possibility is equally likely to be the line, then what you're saying follows. But if they're just saying I have absolutely no clue, that you could just interpret that as being, oh, there's certain there's a range, say like gray zone, where it's there where it has to be, but I just have no clue within that zone where it be.
Right.
All of those are equally possible.
Right, and we're talking about if you say that the whole of the trade equalization process is the gray zone.
Right.
Wait,
But again, I think we're... Go ahead, Rick.
sorry, I feel like there's some confusion. Let me just try to give like an example, because the whole point, yeah, I think Chisholm's trying to say the whole point is just like you can like go case by case, right? But maybe that's gonna take a lot of work. So let's go with some example. What I'm trying to say would be like, well, let's just say my initial starting point will say, well, okay, roughly it's about intelligence, okay, and you're gonna say, well, look, that means you can like give an example. Like,
No, if someone said roughly, I would try to get more clarity of what they're talking about.
No, the point is, I'm not. It's case by case. So then, when you give examples that go counterintuitive, I just say no. Those are, you can just brutally on the other side. You get what I'm saying? Like that's just what.
No, I don't get what you're saying there. So if we're asking, I mean, I guess I'm just not seeing what it is that could be like confusing to you guys about this. It's just like there's like okay, I want to try with Jen because I think I was having the most success with Jen. Jen, what is the criticism here? Because I'm not understanding what the criticism is supposed to be.
I think it's that we're almost smuggling in a kind of generalist view on trades when we're doing this trade equalization process.
Wait, why would that be the case?
Because if we're saying we need to draw the line somewhere, then we have to appeal to some other fact. And what they're saying is, well, oh no, we're just appealing to brute fact.
Wait, what do you mean you'd have to appeal to some other fact?
When you say somewhere, you're referring to a
let me
trait.
just one person, please. Let me just talk to Jen, please.
So when you're saying, well, basically what Toby said, but when you're asking Jack, right, where's the line? Presumably, when he says here's the line, you might not ask why that's the line. You might just forget that and just try to come up with a counterexample or some reductio or whatever, right? But the point is that under his view, he just has to go on a case-by-case basis, so he can't even tell you where there's a line, because there is no one line, right?
Wait, so the criticism is that generalism is being smuggled in, so I don't see how that's the case. It doesn't, there being a line doesn't entail that there's, the person is a generalist. So a particularist can say, we can just have this big range of situations, right? We start with the humans being holocausted. At the end, it's animals being holocausted. The particularist could just say, like, these ones I'm okay with, these ones I'm not okay with. The line is just the point where they become okay with it. It's not like it has to be some.
Yeah, this is what Quick was saying, right? So Quick was saying that suppose I give you as a particularist. Again, it's weird to call it a line because it's not a line. But I say
well, maybe we should hash that out, because what do you mean when you say it's not a line? Like all that I mean, I don't. In fact, I never use the word line. I just say point in trade equalization process where value's lost. Like surely that exists.
That's
whether
not the
you're
case, right? Because what if there's like have you seen functions where there's like infinitely many gaps between I don't want to give specific examples, but I think you're imagining it as basically being a line where you put a point and then
I don't think
beyond
so.
that point.
I don't think I'm doing that.
Then how are you like imagining it if you could like imagine it like mathematically or geometrically?
Well, I'm just imagining like a big series of frames, and in each one you change one more property about the human, and I'm just picturing there's got to be a moral evaluation that the person would make about each one of those frames. And we're just trying to understand, roughly, we're trying to understand where they start saying that value is gone, that they don't care, for example, about murdering the being anymore.
Right. So this when you say like snapshot,
because just to be clear, you'd agree that there is going to be, for all of those frames, either value or not value, regardless of whether you're a particularist or not, surely.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. That's obviously true. But what I'm saying is there's not like, let's say we went through the equalization process, and there's not one linear order we follow. But let's just say we pick one. And Jack says, for the first one, that has value. And the second one, that doesn't have value. Okay, that one has value. And just back and forth between value and non-value, right? So then when you say you try to come up with a reductio, I don't know how that would even work, right? Because there's not some nearby case you can appeal to, because for every other one he says no, yes, right?
Well, you just want to, so you'd want to find out where value is lost, and you'd want to get the example that's as close to the human as possible. So that would be like the general thing you'd try to do there.
Well, I think this is what Quick was saying, right? Because any example you give, he can just say, oh no, that one brutally does have value. But then you're like, well, okay, how about this one? No, that one doesn't. This one does. And he just backs and back and forth, right? So there's no point where you can appeal to some other reductio, because you just be like, oh, that one does have moral value.
Well, wait, but when he says that a given being doesn't have moral value, that could very well be the reductio right there.
But I mean, yeah, if he says something crazy, sure. But let's assume he does. Like, if he says like, oh yeah, everything that's not that's not strictly a human can kill, then obviously
Right.
that would be ridiculous. But let's grant that he doesn't do that, and he's giving what most people, the average person, would agree with, right?
Wait,
And going through each one, snapshot, and saying, well,
you're cutting out. Sorry, snapshotting and what?
so suppose like we were doing snapshot of the equalization process, and each one he's saying yep, no, yes, no, and there's he let's say he aligns with what most people intuitively believe. There doesn't seem to be a reductio anymore, right?
I think that there's an assumption when you say that you're able to actually give an account that most people intuitively align with.
Well, were you? Maybe I'm misremembering, but weren't you the one saying, or maybe it was Jack who was saying it, that there's a general intuition most people would find agreeable?
Well, it could be the case that it's an intuition that once explored, most people don't find agreeable.
But we are exploring, right? Because Jack's going through every single example and saying, yep, no, so forth.
Right. But the way you just spoke, you suggested that there's going to be some account we can give of what beings have value in there and which ones don't, that the majority of people will agree with. And I'm just saying that that's not necessarily true. I don't know why we would assume that would be the case.
Well, okay, regardless of the logistics of that, it seems like there's no reductio in that case, right?
Well,
that's not going to be immediately obvious. Like there's obvious ones, like,
it could very well be
disabled people, right?
Well, wait, it could very well be.
I just don't see how it would.
Well, it just depends what beings they're saying are valueless.
Well, sure. It just seems like, first of all, it would probably be really tedious to go through a bunch of these snapshots. But regardless, it seems like any example you can come up with a reductio that's not already been explicitly said, they can just say, oh no, that one brutally does have moral value, like Quick was saying, right?
Wait, but if they start giving examples of beings that don't have value in that process, like what would those beings be, right? Because you're saying if he just gives these kind of random answers about like this one has value, this one doesn't, this has value, this doesn't, that like he's going to be able to do that in a way that actually aligns with most people's intuitions. I don't know why you would expect that. And then there's a B also. But I don't know why you would expect. Oh yeah, and B, that I'd be able to point out the reductio without actually knowing what beings he's saying that about, right? So I'd have to know specifically what beings he's talking about to give a reductio. I can't give a reductio and you give me a view that doesn't say anything about specific beings. It just says some have value, some don't.
Well, no, I'm talking about specific beings.
Right, but I would need. But you're not like I don't know what. Like I'd need to literally know what being you're talking about to give a reductio.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, suppose I gave, or Jack gave, like, a human head and a cow's body, but really low IQ. And you say, oh, well, so if low IQ is the problem, then what about this? And he's like, oh, no. That
well, wait, but that being right there, that, I mean, I don't think most people would be comfortable even with that.
Well, no,
that sounds like
this is just a simple example. I'm not actually.
Wait, but I think we're talking past each other, and this might actually make it clear. Like, so if someone gave an example like that, right? Like, that is not going to align with what most people think, as far as I can tell. Most people are going to say if you have, like, basically just, like, a disabled person with some, like, cow appendages or something, that it's not okay to just murder that being.
No, yeah, that was just an example. I didn't actually say that he would actually say that has more value.
Right.
I was using that as an
I
example
understand
because,
that, but Jen, the point that I'm trying to get across is that whatever examples they give, they're probably going to be like susceptible to reductio in the same kind of way.
But
as
no,
that.
that's the point. They can't be unless it's a direct reductio. You can't appeal to other cases.
No, I'm not talking about appealing to other cases. I'm talking about the case itself being the reductio.
I mean, sure.
Why would they ever do that?
Sorry?
What?
Why would they ever, like, knowingly give a case where they know it's unintuitive and say it's not, it's valueless? Like,
Well,
they would just
maybe those are just their values.
Okay, but
Yeah, but that's still problematic, right? Because then the other person who's listening will hear that and say, "Oh, I can still hold the same position, but for me, I'll just brutally pick that one to be true."
Exactly.
Well, wait a sec. So I really think that there's some kind of talking past each other going on here, because I'm not seeing any like critique of this right now. So what you said a while ago is that there's some kind of generalism being assumed. Is that still on the table, or have we moved past that?
Well, the generalism was about the line and so forth, but I think you explained your view a little better, and I maybe the generalism wasn't being smuggled in, but
okay.
I think the point
is it
go
okay?
ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask in that case what the critique is, if it's not that.
So the critique is like the thing that Quick and I was just talking about. If so, we're doing this example where someone's going case by case and saying this has value, this doesn't, so on, and then someone's listening, and they hear them say, "Oh, this doesn't have value." They think, "Well, wait a second, that seems a little intuitive." That has no bearing, because they can just take the particularist view and for that specific case say it does have value. There's no problem. They just swap yes and no's where they feel like it fits their moral intuition, right?
Yeah. So if someone says, yeah, so if someone is listening and they just want to they don't want to try to like consider their view overall, and they just want to adjust any specific thing that sounds crazy to them, like, that's okay. It's just the argument's not going to be like persuasive to a person who's doing that, though. Like, the whole idea is
Well, we're assuming they're particularists, right?
exactly.
'Cause if it's not particularist, then I mean, obviously they wouldn't find any of this convincing because they're not particularist, right?
well, no, a particularist could still come to the conclusion. They might start seeing, they could start looking at the kind of beings that are said to not have value and start reflecting and come to a conclusion that they don't know that there's any point where value's lost. Why couldn't that happen with a particularist?
Because they would just say, why not
second.
just
Can
ad
I
hoc throw in a
please
bunch
talk
of
to
others?
one person at a time? Sorry.
So I mean, no, yeah, what Tiny said was right, because if they're a particularist, then they could even forget, they could even totally change their mind about particularism. They might be like, well, if particularism gives me these weird results, maybe particularism is wrong. I mean, that's possible too. But presumably in this case, when they're genuine particularists and they think that there's no general principles to follow in things like this, they'll say, "Oh, there's no problem here." Why would they think there's a problem?
Well, it's not. I guess I'm just a bit confused. So, the idea is.
Wait, sorry. Hold on 1 second. I'll be back in like 5 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. Well, either way, okay, I'll talk to you for a minute then, Toph, if you want. So, the idea is just that someone watching this, like, it's not that every individual person watching will necessarily be persuaded. It's just the idea that a lot of people who are watching are going to see the kind of system that is held by the Carnist and just not align with it. Like, that's kind of the extent of it. Oh, well, that was not 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like you're expecting that if for any given particularist in the audience, they are supposed to be persuaded. It doesn't have to be the case that persuades any particularist who's listening. Like, the whole idea,
Okay.
I think
sure.
it's weird. It's like, it feels like the whole flow of this conversation is there's some kind of assumption about what the argument or the dialogue process is supposed to do that I don't think I have, but that I think you guys have. So, I mean, the idea is just that you get someone to answer these kinds of questions, and it starts spelling out what sort of beings they value here. And the idea is just that the answers that can be given are just going to be unintuitive for most people. So if there's some given person who they are intuitive for, whether they're a generalist or a particularist, it's not going to be persuasive to that person.
Well, no, I agree with that. No, go ahead.
Right, but 1 sec, because I feel like, sorry, for me,
Go ahead.
it's hard to communicate with like a million people at once. Like, it's easy for me to just focus and talk to one person at a time. So if you agree with that, like, that is basically what the argument is designed to do. So at any time that you come in with like some kind of criticism that seems to assume that it's like supposed to persuade everybody, like, that's just not, like, I don't know why, like, that just shouldn't be assumed. It's never been said that that's what it's supposed to do.
Well,
just
yeah, sorry, I should be clear in that the problem is that when we're talking about generalism versus particularism, if a generalist gives some principled reason why, this and this, they might go back and say, you might give them a reductio, and the only option they have really is to either accept it or get rid of the principle, right? But the whole point is that the particularist here can easily just case by case basis say this one has value. This doesn't.
Yeah, of course.
No issue, right?
Yeah, they
So
could.
it seems like it doesn't have much weight against them because they can always just say, "Oh no, that's fine. That one does have value."
Well, wait is again. It seems like the same thing just happened right there. So like, it's gonna just have weight to anyone who doesn't align with the kind of value judgments that are put on the table when we ask the question.
That's not true, though.
So
Wait, can I say something?
well,
I'm sorry.
wait a sec. Sorry, it's really too much at once. Like, I'm trying to ask to just speak with one person at a time, please.
Here, you guys, I'll bow out for a little bit.
Well, I was having the most progress with you. I'd rather just continue talking to you for a sec, Jen, because I feel like if there's anyone who I'm going to get to understand my position, I think it's most likely with you. So,
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, what do you want to say?
I was just going to say it doesn't actually do anything to convince the person who doesn't have the same values, because as was mentioned before, they can just say, well, I want to be a particularist, but take different cases.
Well, someone
Just take all the intuitive cases.
Well, the idea is that a person can be listening to the account that they give, right, of what has value and what doesn't, and disagree and reflect on their own values and come to a different conclusion, right? Like, that's the idea. So I don't know I'm not sure what the criticism is supposed to be there. So,
Okay, can I?
well, just one sec. I'd really like to just talk to Jen for a sec. So, Jen, so it seems like we have a lot of understanding. So it seems like you understand that the general idea here is we run this dialogue process, we get someone to kind of spell out what types of beings have value and which don't, and the idea is just that someone who's watching this is going to hear the kind of things that are said, and then with any luck reflect on their own view and change position, right? So it's not that necessarily every person is going to change their position or something like this. So do you understand like that general goal, and do you see why that would be a reasonable thing to try to do?
Yeah. So no, that part's fine. I don't think I don't think even Jack has an issue with that per se.
Well, I'm curious actually. Does Jack have an issue with that?
I don't know if Jack's still in here.
Oh, maybe he stepped away.
No, no.
Okay.
Hey, Jack, what's up?
Because
I'm here. Sorry. Wait. Oh, there we go. Oh wait. Gotta...
okay,
There
so
we go. There we go. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
No, I think that Tofi and Dur and what's this other
Quick.
guy's name? Quick, yeah. Sorry, I'm bad with names. I think they're getting to the heart of what the objection is about the trade equalization dialogue.
Well, I'm not sure what, like, the whole thing is, like, if you're granting to me the purpose that I just put on the table, that is, like, granting what the argument is supposed to do. So it's like a criticism beyond that is just, like, it seems like it's a criticism of something that you're expecting the argument to do that it's not intended to do. Because the whole idea is what I just put forward and what you guys seem to be in agreement with, right? It's just a tool that you use. You run this dialogue process on someone, and they're going to spell out which kind of beings in here have value and which don't. And the idea is that's going to cause some kind of like reflection among the people listening, possibly the person themselves. You're going to spell out like the conclusions of those positions, and that can result in like a change of position, right? So like that is the idea. Like, it's not something beyond that. So is there a criticism of that?
As it being a tool, like not I wouldn't call it rhetoric, but like as a tool to possibly persuade people. I don't think anyone has that.
Yeah. So when you're criticizing it, like, what is the thing that you're expecting it to do that you're criticizing it for not doing?
That it should have some, again, I'll use the word lightly, but some sort of weight with most people. But it seems like on the particularist account, it doesn't have much weight. It's the only real criticism, I suppose.
Well,
That's correct.
It may or may not have weight to a given particularist. Like, it just depends what kind of, reflection it inspires in them when they actually hear the dialogue process going on. So, like, one particularist might hear the dialogue process and just simply not care that much, find a single example unintuitive, and say, oh, well, I'm just going to change my take on that one example. Another might hear it and go, well, this whole thing seems kind of fucky to me. Like, is there actually anything in this whole set of properties that really matters to me? Or, right, so someone could be a particularist and be affected, like, positively by the argument, like in the direction of veganism or not. The same is true for a generalist. It might just as
well go the other way, right? Because the point is that if, the person is a particularist, right? If the listener, right, is a particularist, right? And so he looks at another particularist's set of beings, or let's say bifurcated set, right? With with the creatures that are eatable and the creatures that are not eatable, right? He just has the option, right, of continuing to eat cows, right, by just modifying the set to include the cases that to move the cases that he finds unintuitive into the other category.
Right.
So
but
the fact that the other person has a set that has unintuitive elements, right, doesn't carry any weight in terms of him abandoning really his desire to eat meat, because all he has to do is say, well, my set overlaps with this person's set, in all these places, but where it doesn't overlap, I just switch them out into the eatable or uneatable category, respectively, and I'm still able to eat cows.
Right, but but that's not. There's nothing. Sorry, Soy Boy, can you mute your mic? There's nothing. No, it's okay. There's nothing like special about particularism there. Like, a generalist can just alter their principles such that it's going to include or exclude some being from, having value. Right. So anyone can always just adjust their position such that the being who seemed like so if we're running the process on someone and they say that a given being doesn't have value, and that seems weird to someone listening, the listener could be a particularist or a generalist, and they could just alter their values such that they count that being as having value, right? So it's not like that's not something that's specific to a particularist. Like, a generalist could do the same thing.
I don't think they could.
Well, they could do it just by altering their set of principles instead of altering.
But
instead
you're the force of your objection against the generalist.
Wait a sec. Instead of taking a particular case and saying, oh, I move this particular case from the unacceptable to the from the acceptable to the unacceptable category, right? A generalist can cause a case to move from the acceptable to the unacceptable category by changing around their principle set, just like the particularist can by changing around their specific evaluations of the situation. So anyone can hear a reductio and then just reformulate their position so that it doesn't have the reductio anymore.
But the problem is that there actually can be a reductio against the generalist on the grounds that if they change their principles, it might entail some other being is not morally valuable that they want to include, or vice versa. Whereas the particularists, they just ad hoc include all the things they want, and there's no reductio you can do. There's no principle overarching that entails any unsatisfactory position.
You don't need any.
Because it's not.
Well, wait. There's a problem. There's a problem there, though. You don't need a principle for there to be a reductio, though, right? Like, if the particularist gives some just makes a moral judgment about a particular being that's out of line with what most people think, like that is the reductio.
Yeah, but I mean that's just assuming that they'll do that.
If the idea is like this argument or this line of reasoning is like less is going to be less effective against a particularist because they can just change their values such that they're
not changing.
They're not changing their values?
No, what they're doing is seeing where the cases are that are unintuitive.
Well, you cut out. I don't know.
Sorry, what they're doing is seeing where the cases that are unintuitive to them are intuitive to the other person. They don't actually have to change anything.
Wait. Well, I thought we were talking about if a particularist gives some kind of answer to this question that has a result that they actually aren't happy with, that they can just adjust that result. They can just say, "Oh, actually, you know what? I do think that being
that's
valid."
kind of like it's kind of like a metaphor, right? The key point is, right?
Well, can you tell me if what I just want to understand if what I just said was accurate? Like, is the idea that if
no.
Okay, well then I'm not sure what you're trying to say exactly.
Let me try reframing the issue in a way that will resolve that part, right? So you could think about it this way. You've got a listener who's a particularist who eats cows but doesn't eat humans. And you've got a person on display, right, who's being interrogated, who also is a particularist who eats cows and doesn't eat human beings, right? Now, then the person who's being interrogated, right, is given this kind of inventory, right? In which he's given all these examples and asked which ones would be eatable and which ones wouldn't be, right? Now the listener can look at that set and say, well, he's got lots of examples that are unintuitive to me, where if I were asked, I wouldn't have put them in the eatable category, I would have put them in the uneatable category, or vice versa. But he's not actually changing anything,
okay,
right? He's just noticing that the interlocutor, right, just has inverse values from him when it comes to specific examples.
How is that any... I just don't
nothing...
understand how that's different than what happens with a generalist who's listening, though. A generalist can listen and just hear their set of things that they agree with or don't agree with and go, oh, like, I agree or I don't agree. Like, what's the difference there, whether it's a particularist or a generalist listening?
People keep bringing up force of the argument here, and the force against the generalists is actually present because it's very difficult to find principles that you want for one case that'll work for all cases.
Exactly.
Whereas for the particularist, it's not very difficult to just throw in whatever seems intuitive.
So the idea is, well, I'm just trying to understand with the example that Jack just gave. So there's someone who's listening, and they're a generalist or they're a particularist, and they hear some kind of position coming from the person who's having named the trait run on them that they don't agree with. I don't understand why that's any different for like a particularist or a generalist. Like anyone could be listening and go, I agree or I don't agree.
Well, I think Tofi gave the answer. It's possible, right, that somebody could give a principle which the other person would agree with down the line, right, when you ran the trait equalization process, right? But given that it's so difficult to find a principle that will cover all the intuitive and unintuitive cases, right, it's very easy to construct a reductio that will persuade most of these so-called listeners, right, that there's a problem with the principle being offered, right?
Yeah.
But see, it's not actually interesting, right, for the person to learn if the other person is a particularist, that they have these unintuitive cases, right? Because they're going to expect that, given that they're particularists, right, that they're just going to have different particulars from the other person. So when they start disclosing the unintuitive cases, right, it doesn't actually move them to revise their position, because they're not seeing any problem. They're just seeing somebody who has different values.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with that. So you could have a particularist listening who currently thinks it's fine to eat animals and not fine to eat humans, and they notice the kinds of evaluations that their fellow particularist is making about the beings in the trade equalization process. They're unhappy with them. They try to reflect for themselves on which beings have and don't have value, and then they realize that they're having a hard time doing so, and they start questioning whether animals actually have value or not, right? So that can happen just as well if you're dealing with a particularist.
But I don't think any of us are denying that it can.
Yeah, I mean, then I don't get it. Like, is the assertion that, like, that's some, like, minority of particularists who that would be the case for?
Well,
There's no rational motivation.
Yeah, that's.
Well, rational motivation. What do we even like? Wait, okay. I don't want to get way off in the weeds on whatever is meant by that. So, all I want to say is that the whole idea is you run this dialogue process. The person starts spelling out what their system actually says, and then listeners, particularist or not, will reflect on those answers and hopefully be prompted to think about veganism, right? So that's the whole idea. I don't understand unless we're saying that, like, particularists tend to have, like, radically different views on what's acceptable or not than generalists. I don't know why we'd expect some, like, big difference in how they're affected.
Because suppose somebody has strong reasons to suppose particularism is true, and they come to see that some other particularist has unintuitive beliefs, they're just going to say, well, there's no problem with particularism. We have very good reasons to suppose it's true. So I'm just going to say, let's just take these other intuitive things. They're not going to just say, well, let's consider.
They could do that.
Veganism is actually.
They could do that, or they could end up thinking, well, like, where do I draw these lines, and is there actually a good answer, and then reflecting on whether they ultimately even agree with carnism, right? So
the good answer is just all the things they want.
1 second. So it seems like you're saying that a given person could just kind of, like, ad hoc alter their view so it doesn't have the consequence, and you're saying
no, they're not altered.
The person listening is not altering their view?
That's right.
I thought we were saying that they just have an unspecified view, and then they specify that, like, that's a case.
Yeah, that person.
Sorry, what I mean,
person.
yeah. So I'm including moving from uncertainty to certainty as, like, altering a view. So if the idea, so the whole idea is you run this process, people hear the argument, and then they're going to reflect and see if they think the idea is that they're going to reflect on that process and then consider, like, do I think the beings in this process have value? Which ones do, which ones don't? And maybe ultimately make their way to, like, well, do I even think do I really agree that animals shouldn't have value? And it can be a particularist or a generalist who hears the argument and has that kind of reaction, or it could be a particularist or a generalist who hears the argument and has the reaction of, well, I'm just going to like, alter my position. You know what I mean by alter, such that it doesn't have that consequence, right? So if the idea is just that it's easier for a particularist to do, like, the altering part, then, like, yeah, I mean, that seems fine. It seems easier to just say, oh, I just changed my judgment about this situation, then, like, I build a new principle set. But unless you think that particularists and generalists have, like, radically different views about what is right, I don't know why we'd expect it to necessarily be, like, more effective for generalists.
It's not a question of necessarily, right? The point is simply that obviously it's it's fundamentally just going to be an empirical question, right? Whether the methodology has a better outcome for veganism than for some rival view, right? But the point is that it seems like if somebody is a particularist, right, it offers them a very easy way to avoid the uncomfortable consequences that most generalists are going to be up against when they're confronted with these kinds of thought experiments.
Yeah, well,
right?
I think that's just like generally true for particularists. Like, I think that a particularist, like anytime, one second, anytime that you're shown some kind of conclusion that seems unpalatable to you or to others about your moral view, if you want to get rid of it, you can always just say, well, no, my evaluation is actually like, yeah, that situation's fine, right? You can kind of like.
Well, they're not doing that though, right? The point is.
Well, I thought they were moving from an unspecified, from uncertainty to.
They might say, okay, I don't know which. I've never inventoried all the examples, so I don't know in advance which ones are going to be acceptable and which aren't, right? But the point is that it seems like, given that when you start asking that question, right, they can just classify according to their intuitions, right? The question is, why would we expect that what's more likely, right, is that their intuitions are going to fall in such a way that more vegans are going to be produced than people are going to actually solidify their reasons for continuing to eat meat.
So I guess I want to get to the core of this. So let's see what we agree on. So we agree that you can just run this dialogue process. People are going to produce their answers to it, and then those who are watching are going to either be prompted to reflect or not, right? Like, we can agree on that much?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then are we going further and saying that a particularist who's listening is like far less likely to reflect on their views than a generalist?
Well, we're saying that it's far less likely that the types of considerations that will cause discomfort to most generalists, right, would arise in their case, right? Because anytime a case seems uncomfortable, they will just say, well, given that case makes me uncomfortable, I would just place that in the uneatable category, right? If I were given that, right?
They could do that, or they could be prompted to reflect on their view. So what I'm trying to understand,
we're not.
What I'm just trying to understand is what exactly, like, what is the criticism supposed to be? Like, what is it that you are saying is like bad or something here?
Well, it just seems like it's very possible that the strategy might actually be contrary to your goal.
Why would you expect that it would be contrary to my goals? I mean, that's not the...
Because I assume your goal would be to convince more people of veganism.
Yeah, I think that would be good. So,
but there's no real reason to suppose that'll happen with this.
To suppose that it would persuade more people to go vegan than not to go vegan?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can just kind of like appeal to, my experience in actually using the argument. Like, most people aren't able to generate a good answer to it. A lot of people do go vegan from hearing it, but we don't have some kind of like statistics.
When we say more people, we mean particularists here. Like, I think, yeah, you're usually talking to people who aren't very familiar and are just kind of taking for granted this this principled approach.
Yeah, so, well, wait, so are you granting that for a large number of people, this is likely to skew in the direction of veganism when you say that? Because particularists are presumably like a minority, right?
I'm saying usually the people you're talking to might just have generalist leaning, or whether they do or not, like they just take for granted without realizing.
Okay, so I guess I'm still just where I'm at now is I'm just trying to understand like what the objection is supposed to be. So the objection is supposed to be it's supposed to be what exactly?
The objection is just that it doesn't have force against the particulars where it has against the generalist.
Well, wait, I mean force, I just take that to mean that like it's forceful if it causes them to reflect on their views.
Well, it's not just really that it reflects on their view. It has to have the outcome that you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, like, reflecting on their views, and, like, the goal there is that if they reflect on those views, it'll go in the direction of veganism. So, I don't see a reason to think that a particularist will hear the kind of answers that are given to these questions, and then and then skew less in the direction of veganism than a generalist. Like, I would just kind of make the same induction for, like, any person. Like, if I just see how most people react to the argument, I would assume that it would probably be the same general thing for particularists. They hear the examples, they probably have some kind of similar reaction to the general population about which beings there have value and which don't, and then they are probably as likely as anyone else to reflect on their position and alter it to veganism at that point.
I don't think that's true. I think the particularist is more likely to just say, well, I want to keep eating meat.
Why? What's the reason for that? It seems like you're assuming that particularists are just going to are like less willing to reflect on their values or something.
No, because they're going to reflect on their values, but then they're just going to say, well, I just take X, Y. You know, I just say the list.
Yeah, they're going to look at the person they're going to look at the person you've interrogated and say, oh, well, the fact that he has unusual intuitions by my lights when it comes to certain examples.
Are what? Certain examples?
Issue, because I just don't put those people in. I don't put those creatures in that
it
set.
sounds
if it doesn't pose any problem for their particulars, why would they change their particulars?
I don't want to get like gang attacked by a fucking group of people. Let's just take our time. So, I don't know why you would think it would be the case that a particularist would hear the kind of answers that are given to these types of questions and then be any less likely to reflect on their overall moral decision about being a non-vegan than a generalist would.
Well, we've explained that.
Because it doesn't.
Okay, well, I
don't do anything.
Pardon?
If the argument doesn't do anything to harm particularism, why would they?
Why would the argument do something to harm particularism?
Because if it doesn't give them some reason to suppose generalism, like what? Why would they just suddenly become vegan? Why would they not just say, well, I just intuitively think that all these beings are edible?
Wait a second. What do you mean assume generalism? Why is generalism possibly coming into this, right? So the argument is not designed to make someone think, oh, I should become a generalist. That's just like, it's not even related. I don't know how you would get to something like that. The idea is just, I mean, again, I think I'm just repeating myself, so, like, I'm not sure, like, maybe it's just not, like, getting through, but I think I've been pretty clear. So someone hears this, right? They hear the dialogue flow process, and then they hear the examples that are given, and then those examples very likely strike them as unintuitive. They reflect on their view, right? And then I don't see why we'd think that a particularist is any less likely to reflect and go vegan than a generalist would be.
What would be the motivation? What would be the motivation for the particularists to just randomly go vegan? Why not just say, well, I think that these...
Well, they could have... Well, let me answer. They could have the exact same kind of reaction that a generalist has well, I mean, the generally same reaction, where they could hear those cases and they could go, well, I don't feel too good about those cases. Let me think this problem through. Where exactly do I think, what kind of beings do I think have value in here or not? And they could start going through it in their head, right? And they could start being like, I'm actually struggling with this. I don't know if I can generate answers here that make me too happy. And then they can be like, well, I mean, what about the question in the first place of if I even think it's okay to kill animals, right? So it seems like they could just as easily make their way there as a generalist could. What is wrong with the account that I just gave? What's the problem with that?
I don't see the thought process that would be going on in the particular head, but that.
Well, I'm gonna
that
say
would
what
make them
I'm gonna say
would-
what you and Jack just said to me, which is it's been explained to you. I mean, I just walked you through it, right? So the thought process could be, for example, well, all of those the way that this person just categorized these creatures seemed very unintuitive to me. Let me think about this. How might I categorize them? I'm actually struggling to even find what kind of beings in here have value and what kind of beings don't.
We're not saying that it's not possible for that to happen, right? It's easy to say it's logically possible that this could be the outcome, right? That's not the issue.
Right, but I'm asking you why you think that would be less likely to happen with a particularist than a generalist.
Why would we?
Why would you what?
Why would
Duncan,
we
can
think
you mute your mic? You're going off. Why would we think what?
that they would find it in?
You're breaking up. Why would we think that? Sorry, it's fine. Why would we think that they would find it what?
Find it uncomfortable that another particularist itemizes or inventories, let's say, the individual examples, right, in a different way than they would inventory.
Okay, sorry. The question is, why would they find the fact that another particularist inventories the examples differently than them? Why would they find that what?
Why would they find that in some way
And it's your mic. A what?
an uncomfortable truth to learn?
Well, the idea, why would they find it uncomfortable? Well, because they have different values.
No, but the point is they would expect at the outset that the itemization would be different from their particulars.
Sure, but when they hear the specific itemization, they might go, well, wait, some of those seem, now that I actually think about the kind of beings that are in here, some of this seems really weird to me, right? What kind of classification would I engage in here, right? So the idea, again, it seems like we're going in circles, because it seems like I'm giving you the account of what the argument does, how a particularist could react to it, and I'm just not understanding, are you just objecting and saying a particularist isn't likely to do that?
Well, it doesn't seem to be likely.
Why would you think that?
Because it seems so easy to imagine the particularist to just say, oh, well, I just don't put those examples.
So your claim is basically that, so let me just make sure I understand. You think the argument could be effective for generalists, the argument could be effective for particularists, but because it's easier for particularists to find their way to a position that makes sense, there's a lower chance of this dialogue process causing a particularist to reflect on their views and change them.
Well, it seems
It seems what?
It doesn't really seem like there's any likelihood that they should change their views at all.
Well, that's
right,
well, wait, any likelihood? That seems like a strange claim. It seems like you're entering people's minds or something. A lot of people are going to react by hearing the kind of view that's put forward and going, well, I certainly don't align with that. What kind of answer do I want to generate? And then at that point, they're thinking about the question.
Yeah,
but they're not going to change their view.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, oh, the outcome of this process is, it turns out that as I go through the inventory, right, every intermediate example, goes in.
Every intermediate example goes what?
In one or the other category. Like that whole set of intermediate examples gets lumped into one or the other.
The idea is just that a particularist is not likely to hear the dialogue process and reflect on their view. Is that what the criticism is supposed to be?
No, they might reflect on their...
Duncan, can you please stop? I just want to talk to one person at a time. Thank you.
No, actually, go ahead, Tofi, because I'm having problems with the app, so it's probably better if he does.
Well, what I'm saying is, lost my train of thought now, but it's not that they won't reflect on their view. Rather, it's that when they reflect on their view, there's not really, given that there's no problem for their view that's actually been posed, there's no reason for them to think, oh, well, I might have to reevaluate. Like, this is presumably somebody who's already, somebody who might be eating meat or something, right? Who's just listening and is saying, well, maybe I should reevaluate and become vegan. Like, why would they do that? There's no reason for them to do that at all.
Oh, well, I just completely disagree with that, right? They could hear someone start spelling out the examples of what beings have value and don't, and go, well, wait, that seems very strange to me, and then they start thinking for themselves about what beings have value and which don't. That seems completely...
But there's nothing in that thought process
that seems astoundingly straightforward to me.
There's nothing in the thought process of thinking which beings have value and which beings don't that's going to cause the particularists to think, oh, well, I guess I just have to go vegan. Like, what they...
I think you're just entirely missing the point. The idea is you run this dialogue process, someone starts generating answers, a particularist listening could hear those answers and go, well, I mean, a lot of those seem really fucking weird to me. How would I try to answer this question, right? And that's where the thinking starts. Like, is there some kind of problem with that analysis that I just gave?
No, we're granting that it's logically possible.
Well, we're not just talking about like logical possibility though. It's like that. It's the idea is I don't understand why that would be any less likely for a particularist than a generalist. It seems to me like anyone who hears the argument or the dialogue process being run and hears answers being given that they don't agree with is likely to think, well, what are my answers? It just seems irrelevant whether they're a particularist or a generalist.
The reason why it's relevant. The reason why it's relevant is that for any principle that's invoked, right, it's easy to find examples that would be counterintuitive with respect to application of that principle.
Right. Yeah. No. In the
case of the particularist, right? If you encounter somebody who has a counterintuitive belief set, right, that doesn't pose any problem for them, right? Because they just think that's not my belief set.
I think that I don't know what it is, but it seems like you're just not tracking what I'm saying. I mean, just think about this, okay? You hear someone asked a question, they give an answer that seems radically wrong to you. I don't understand why that would prompt a particularist to think about the question for themselves any less than it would prompt a generalist to think about the question for themselves.
We're not saying it doesn't prompt them to think about it.
Okay, well,
right?
but when you say that, you're giving massive ground to what I'm saying here. So if
I don't think so.
Well, wait. So if the criticism is not that a particularist is less likely to reflect on their values, given that they hear the name the trait conversation taking place. If the claim is not that they're any less likely to reflect on their values, then what is the claim? That reflection is less likely to lead to veganism for the particularist?
Absolutely.
That doesn't seem at all obvious to me, right? They could start thinking about the question and realize that their values align with veganism just as likely as a generalist could.
Why you would
Pardon me?
Yeah, it's logically possible, right? But when you say
No,
just
no,
as
no.
likely,
The claim isn't just logically possible. I don't know why you keep trying to back it up to logically possible, as if I'm making some insanely minimal claim or something, right? My claim is I don't see any reason, right? So if we agree that the name the trait dialogue process is just as likely to make a particularist reflect on their views as it is to make a generalist reflect on their views, and then the claim we're disagreeing about is that that reflection is more likely to lead to veganism for a generalist than a particularist, I just don't see why I would think that, right? Like, it seems...
we gave you the reason why.
Right, well, just listen to this, okay? So it seems to me like humans generally have, like, somewhat similar values. You know, we've evolved in a similar way. If we're in the same kind of society, we've been, you know, encultured in the same kind of way. And it seems like if you start reflecting on your values with respect to some given topic, I mean, you're about as likely as anyone else who grew up in the same kind of culture, who has the same kind of evolutionary history, to reach the kind of answer that that other person would reach. I don't see why we would assume that not to be the case.
Well, because
and also even if we grant that a particularist is less likely to be persuaded by the argument, I don't know what exactly the problem is there. But I'm not even granting that. That's not obvious to me.
Well, the idea is, right, that in the generalist case, the reason why the generalist is more likely to abandon their willingness to eat meat and become a vegan, right, is because as long as they want to stick to generalism, it's hard for them to find a principle that will accommodate all the counterintuitive cases, right?
Yeah,
but
okay.
That bar, right, is just not there in the particularist case, right?
Yeah, so
that's all there is to it.
Right. So the idea is that you know, you have a generalist and you have a particularist, and they both here name the trait being run, and they start reflecting on their values, that the particularist is less likely to adjust their values to veganism because it's easier for them to construct a position that that still justifies carnism. Like, is that the idea?
Well, I wouldn't use the word construct exactly, but
you
could say discover, you know.
Sure.
They could discover, because the point is, no challenge is really being offered to them, right? In the generalist case, there's a clear challenge, right? They're saying, oh, if I thought that was a good principle, right? Like, let's say the person gives the principle and the person who's listening thinks, oh, that sounds attractive. That sounds like a good description of my own position, right? Or that sounds like an attractive position to me, right? As soon as you encounter one counterexample, you think, oh, the principle is in jeopardy. I have to abandon it and find another one, right? And I'm granting that it's actually going to be extremely hard to do that, right? For most people.
Okay.
So I think for generalists, it seems like a very good strategy, right?
Okay.
But see, in the particularist case, right, when somebody says, these are my particulars, right, that's not actually posing a challenge to them, right? That's just ordinary moral disagreement, right? Which is what they expect at the outset, right? That other people are going to have different particulars than they do. So when the person goes through the inventory and says, this case goes in the eatable category, this case goes in the uneatable category, and the listener thinks, well, that's not how I would classify it if it were posed to me. It's not actually a challenge to their intuitions, right? Because they're just saying, I have different intuitions than they do, right? But it's not as though I'm dealing with some uncomfortable inconsistency if I thought I was upholding some principle and then found counterintuitive cases that didn't seem to fit with the principle.
Yeah,
Do you see what we're getting at?
I think I see to some degree. It might just take more talking about it, but
Okay, no problem.
So when we're talking about, we have a particularist and a generalist. They both here name the trait being run, and they're both prompted to an equal degree to reflect on their values. It seems like we get that far, and we all agree. And then it seems like the disagreement is that a particularist is more likely to, upon reflection, just still come out with values that are carnist, right? Like, that's the claim that we disagree about?
Well, I'm not taking like a strong stand on this because it's ultimately an empirical question, right?
Sure,
I'm just
of course.
I'm offering what seems like a major word, right?
Okay, well,
I'm offering what seems like a major word.
Well,
that kind of.
Right, but I just want to, so just to be clear, so, because I just want an answer to that so I can understand. Like, part of why I ask questions is so I can just know what the other person is saying exactly. So we agree. We run the argument, a particularist hears it, a generalist hears it. They're both prompted to the same degree, as far as we can tell, to reflect on their values. The idea is that upon reflection on their values, a particularist is more likely to just maintain a carnist value set than a generalist?
Well, we're offering
You're offering
we're offering a consideration that would favor that conclusion.
Right, so the reply that I have is I think that people are, we're biologically similar, we've been raised in similar cultures, and I think that, say you have one particularist and one generalist, if they're biologically similar and they're encultured in a similar way and they reflect on a given question, I think that they're pretty likely to generate similar answers to it. I think it's just the getting them to reflect once you get there is just as likely to get one to reach the conclusion as it is to get the other to reach it. Like, if you were, like, for example, Jack, if you were just making the claim that a particularist who wants to, like, kind of, like, ad hoc, like, maintain their position as a carnist will have an easier job than a generalist.
No, but it's not ad hoc.
Right, no, wait, stop. I understand that's not the claim you're making. I'm just talking about a nearby claim that I would agree with. Like, I would certainly agree with that. It's easier to just generate some kind of position that makes sense of, whatever the moral qualm is as a particularist. But just to, like, really hammer down on, like, the core thing, because obviously, like look, when we're having a disagreement, I take it to be the case that there is, like, some proposition out there, or propositions, that you and I have different attitudes towards. Like, I think it's true, you think it's false. I'm pretty sure that it's, I'm not sure at all about whether it's true or false. You think it has a true or false status, right? So what I'm trying to do is just find the proposition that is in contention. So that's why I'm asking you, like, is this what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? So we agree, if we have a particularist and a generalist listening to the argument, that both of them, as far as we can tell right now, of course it's an empirical question, but as far as we can tell right now, they'd both be prompted to the same degree to reflect on their values. And then it seems like what might be the proposition that we're disagreeing about is the proposition that upon reflection, the particularist is more likely to maintain a carnist value set. Is that the proposition we're disagreeing about?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so my reason for not thinking that that's the case, right? And it's possible it could be the case, but I bet even if it is the case, it's not the case to some massive degree. And the reason I think that is because if people are biologically similar and culturally similar, and you have two people who, by whatever means, are prompted to reflect on a given moral question, that just in virtue of that biological and cultural similarity, they're likely to generate similar answers. Do you just, before you make another point, can you just tell me if you agree with that or not?
I guess in this case, probably not.
Okay, but I don't really understand why it would be. Okay, wait. Why would it be different in this case than in any other case? Like, so when I ask you a general question of, like, if a particularist and a generalist are both who've been raised in a similar way, like, it's not two people from different ends of the earth or something. If we have a particularist and a generalist and they're both prompted to reflect on a given moral question, that sorry, let me just catch my thoughts. That they're likely to generate similar answers in virtue of the fact that they're biologically and culturally similar. You say in this case that's less likely. Why would that be less likely in this specific case than in any case where they're made to reflect on some moral question?
Because it just seems like veganism and vegan arguments are actually have a lot of currency, and it hasn't really done that much to convince people to stop eating.
But that seems like it would apply kind of equally to particularists and generalists. It seems like if the idea is that there's some ambient level of support for carnism, that's people get whatever from biology, from culture, whatever it might be, then it seems like if you say that a particularist and a generalist are given a question about carnism to reflect on, that to whatever degree that biases the generalist towards carnism, it's going to do the same for the particularist. I don't understand why we'd expect from that a differential response.
Well, I mean, I thought the idea was that if people are made to reflect on it, they're going to be more likely to come to the same answer in virtue of the fact that they share the same cultural background and the same biology.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. And then you suggested that you don't think that's the case in this example, which I take that to mean that you think that that's normally the case, but there's some kind of exception here for some reason. Unless I'm misunderstanding.
I don't know whether it's normally the case or not, right? But it seems like in this case, it just doesn't seem.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. I mean, to me, it seems like people who are biologically and culturally similar are likely to generate similar answers to moral questions. That just seems like something that's just generally going to be true. And that's why I wouldn't expect, if a particularist and a generalist both honestly reflect on this question, I wouldn't expect them to generate radically different answers because they have a similar culture and they have a similar biology.
Well, if that is what you would expect, it seems like the evidence would be overturning that hypothesis.
What's the evidence there?
That with exposure to arguments about veganism, vast numbers of people are still unmoved.
Right, but that's an argument that it seems like you're saying there that maybe arguments for veganism are overall ineffective, right? That's not giving some explanation of why, if you have a generalist and a particularist who have similar upbringing and biology, that they would be likely to generate significantly different answers, right? It sounds like you're just giving some.
They do generate different answers.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, many people think that eating meat is okay, and many people think it's not.
Right, but do you think that the support for veganism is do you think that it's differentially distributed between particularists and generalists?
Oh, I have no idea.
Right, because that's the kind of question that I'm getting at. It sounds like you're saying something about the general efficacy of arguing for veganism as it applies to particularists and generalists, right? So, I mean, okay, but that doesn't seem like an account of why it's more likely, why it's likely to be the case that a particularist and a generalist will generate different answers than each other when they're prompted to reflect on a given moral question.
No, but we have given an explanation for why we would expect that.
I don't think that we've gotten there. So we agreed that if a generalist and a particularist are both exposed to this sort of dialogue process, as far as we can tell, it's equally likely to prompt them to reflect. And then the claim is that a particularist is the outcome of them going vegan is less likely for a particularist than a generalist. So what's being said there is that you think in the case of veganism that if particularists and generalists are both prompted to think about this question, particularists are less likely to come out vegan. And then I just asked you if you think there's any, if you even know about different like levels of veganism among particularists and generalists, and you said no. So I assume we must be talking past each other in some way, because if you don't know that, then it seems like what you should be saying is, well, no, I don't really have any reason to believe that if a particularist and a generalist are both made to reflect on their values, a particularist is less likely to come out vegan than a generalist.
Oh, but we gave you the reason.
I don't really think you did. So do you want to give it again?
So the idea is that if a person is a meat eater and a generalist, right, it's very easy if they're asked to produce a principle to inventory examples that will be counterintuitive with respect to application of that principle, right? And so it's actually going to be very hard for them to maintain generalism by revising the principle in order to accommodate all the counterintuitive cases, right?
Okay.
But in the case of particularism, right? If somebody says, "Oh, I'm a particularist and I'm a meat eater," right? And then they start inventorying all the cases, these so-called intermediate cases, right? And putting them into the eatable and uneatable category, right? It's not actually a challenge to that particularist's own view, right, to encounter those cases, right? Because that's just not, if they were asked those questions, that's just not how the classification they would come up with, right? They would just say, oh, well, yeah, I overlap with this guy here, here, and here, but these cases, you know, are ones where I would put them in the other category, right? So nothing about, nothing has been sort of adduced to make me uncomfortable in my position, right? All that's happened is that I've discovered, which is what I would expect, that other people have intuitions that go against the grain of mine, you know, when it comes to these, when it comes to these types of examples.
Okay, so I think we might be finally zeroing in, because it was when you said this very kind of thing before that I raised this same kind of objection. So what you seem to be saying is that it's easier for a particularist to, I don't want to say generate or construct or whatever, but to just, whatever, we're just going to deal with the imperfect language, to, come up with a position, a Carnus position that they're comfortable with. Like if we're saying it's here, let me catch my thoughts and think about how best to put this. It seems like what you're saying is that for a generalist, it's harder to construct a framework that cuts against veganism because principles reach into other areas, and when you create a principle against veganism, it's likely to have some kind of implication you're not comfortable with. Whereas a particularist just doesn't need to have any of those implications because they can just have a different particular judgment there, right? That's the kind of thing you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, right. So this is the kind of thing that was said before when I then raised this point, right? So the question is, why would we assume that the particularist and the generalist how do I put it, as a starting point from what they've learned from culture and what's been ingrained in them from biology, different values? So if what you're putting out is look, it's easier for a particularist to construct like a Carnist position. For a generalist, you're going to have these like implications if you try to generate some anti-vegan principle that you'd probably be uncomfortable with. So it's like harder for a generalist to do it. That's getting at, like, it's almost like that's a question about if the person is trying to like fight veganism, like how hard a time they're having. Whereas like what I'm asking about is if we just look at people as they are with the values they have, what reason do we have to assume that particularists are less likely to have values that align with veganism upon inspection than generalists?
Well,
because I grant you your point. I grant you the point that it's easier for a particularist to generate like a Carnist framework than a generalist. Like that for sure, absolutely. But I don't see why it would be the case that we'd expect them to have different values given their shared like upbringing and biology. At least not like radically different.
Well, maybe the issue there is that we're not thinking about why the generalist doesn't just become a particularist to accommodate those cases.
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, because it could be the case, right, that when you adduce counterexamples to the generalist, right, if they just have some prior commitment to generalism, right, they're kind of like forced by those counterexamples to, you know, have to become vegans, right, because they can't find a principle to encounter the counterintuitive cases. But maybe it's the case that many of them aren't really aware of the particularist option.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that maybe like the kind of values that a generalist and a particularist hold are actually similar, but the generalist just has a harder time generating a position that captures those values, so they're more likely to like capitulate to veganism. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that I agree with. I don't have a problem with that. So then the question becomes about what those underlying values are and if they actually ultimately support veganism.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know either. This is
yeah.
So I sit there as a subjectivist, right? Like, and when I say I'm a subjectivist, like, look, I don't know your view super well. Like, you think that there's a real world out there and there's real things out there that we perceive, and those things really do have an effect of making us have a given value, and it's like those value properties are just whatever actual like physical properties of objects out there cause you to have a given like reaction or like evaluation. Like you have like, I don't know exactly, but you have some kind of view that's roughly something like that, right, about metaethics?
I think that there are value properties that are non-natural that suffuse objects and states of affairs over and above their physical properties. And it's in virtue of perceiving those that one acquires moral or evaluative beliefs.
Okay, I don't want to end up way in the weeds here, just for the sake of
no,
like
that's fine.
No, I know, just for the sake of keeping it on track. But you just on your view, are those value properties natural or are they non-natural?
None.
Okay, so I guess there is a bit of a difference between our views, but I don't think that my view will be like radically offensive to you. So like, and I'm not against non-natural things. I'm just not convinced they exist. So the way that I think about it is, I think that like subjectivism is just like two propositions. Like I think that indexed moral propositions have truth value, and I think that the truth value of those propositions is like determined by the attitude of the subject they're indexed to. So to me, a moral proposition is just something like, you know, for Jack, it's wrong to like punch a child or something, assuming that's wrong for you. I don't know. And all that ultimately means is like, it's true that Jack has like a negative attitude towards punching children. So like I'm sure we could pick little areas of disagreements, but broadly there's like a similar meta-ethic there. It's like it's anti-realist. There's not like, well, I guess you would call that a form of realism, but it's like it's pretty relative though.
It's
like, you know
sort
what
of
I mean?
like a midway. Yeah, it's a relativist form of realism, you might say.
Sure.
It's realist it's realist with respect to most other anti-realist views, but with respect to full-blown, robust realist views, it's relativistic, which is to say anti-realistic in some respects. So it's sort of like a midway, intermediate type position.
Yeah, like I have a feeling that there's nothing about my view that contradicts your view. I think your view might just have more specifics to it than mine. So like, since mine is just two propositions, I can just see what you think about it. So if I say indexed moral propositions have truth value, and all I mean by an indexed moral proposition is something like, for Jack, it's wrong to do X, all that means is you have a negative attitude towards that thing. I'm sure you'd agree with that so far?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and then if we say the truth value of those indexed propositions is contingent on the attitude of the subject they're indexed to, I mean, all that means is like, say that the proposition is like, for Jack it's wrong to do X, but you actually have a positive attitude towards doing X. Well, then the proposition that for you it's wrong to do that is false, because it's just not true that you have a negative attitude towards the thing. So you'd probably agree with that second proposition. Like, given that understanding of what an indexed moral prop is, of course its truth value changes depending on whether the subject it's indexed to actually has the attitude described by the proposition or not.
Right, okay.
Okay, so like, I'm sure that we could talk about technicalities there, but we like broadly agree, right? So now just back to the thing about veganism. So I think we agreed on quite a lot there, and then at the end we just came down to okay, so the let me see if I can recap this. So we do run name the trait dialogue process. A particularist is listening, a generalist is listening. They're both, as far as we can tell, equally prompted to reflect on their values. And then we say that for the particularist, try not to mess this part up, for the particularist, it's going to be easier to come up with a framework. I know you don't like the word come up with, but I just don't know what to use right now. So come up with a framework that remains carnous than the generalist, because again, for the generalist, they're going to have to find principles that do it, and principles are just more likely to be susceptible to reductio.
That's right.
So then the question just becomes, okay, so setting aside that fact about it's easier for the particularist to maintain a carnous position, just looking at the underlying values they both have, like we're basically saying they're likely to have the same underlying values, but it's going to be harder. So I think I can say this right. So they're likely to have the same underlying values, but the generalist is more likely to capitulate to veganism because for them it's going to be harder to generate an anti-vegan position, right? We agree about all that?
Yes.
And then the question is just, okay, so those underlying values that we assume are roughly similar between the particularist and the generalist who've had similar upbringing in biology, do those underlying values actually support veganism?
Yeah, I'm not taking a position on that.
Yeah, and I actually don't really take a position there either. I mean, I have my leanings. I think
well, you probably have more insight into it than I do, because I don't really spend a lot of time talking about veganism. Well, certainly not as much as you do, right? I mean, I don't know whether you do it all day, but you've been doing it for years, right? And you're doing it a lot, and I wouldn't say I've been doing that.
Right, okay. No, so yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, I'm not going to try to leverage my insight, but like, I think that I could go from things that we both probably agree with. So I would not actually try to hold down a way that those like base intuitions go one way or the other. It's not, that would just be a thing you'd need to dig up some empirical data to try to make a case for, so we're obviously not going to debate that here and now. But I think that most people actually tend to care about animals when you tell them about animals. Most people, if they like saw an animal being abused in front of them, wouldn't actually be like very comfortable with that happening.
I think I would agree with that. And actually, I mean, I've often thought that just showing slaughterhouse footage is more effective than any argument. is likely to be.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I used to actually put a lot of slaughter footage into my videos. I think it depends who you're dealing with, but you know, people always, for some reason, because of what I do, they think that I'm likely to have answers to like what is the most effective thing you can do, and I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a danger the other way, right? Is that people can become inured, right? Because presumably slaughterhouse workers are like not that different from concentration camp guards, right? Like, well, I'm sure there's a range, right? But probably many of them, they just don't even really, like maybe when they first started working or first started doing those kinds of things, they found it difficult to do. But probably for many of them, when they do it day after day for years, the suffering just becomes invisible, right? So I suppose that there's a danger it could go in the other direction.
Well, some of them end up like deeply tormented, but like there's definitely that. I mean, I can even tell you from my own experience without like I don't want to we'll not eat up all our time talking about our lives or something, but from my experience, like I had to edit so many videos with slaughter footage that it has no impact on me. Like I could watch
that's interesting.
Well, yeah, it's just from all this editing. I'm still a committed vegan because I understand like what I value, but it's just like I could see the most fucked up thing. Yeah.
For me, like you should understand, I actually don't have any hostility towards veganism. In fact, I would actually be much happier if everybody became a vegan, right? It's just never been something that's been very convenient for me to do, right? But if I had to actually like kill the animal, or if somebody were there in front of me saying, okay, this is your dinner, you make the decision, pull the trigger, I'm going to pull the trigger, you just give me the order and I'll pull the trigger, right? It would be very hard to do that, right? But when you go to a grocery store, you just aren't thinking about those things.
Right.
So that's the...
Sorry, you cut out. So that's
the only kind of... Sorry, that's the reason why, the slaughterhouse footage sort of like prompts consideration, right? Because it's sort of like something analogous to that, right? Where you're just sort of it's in your face, right?
Absolutely.
You're not able to sort of like exactly.
Well, here's another thing that might be interesting to you. So a lot of people when they start talking about the arguments and getting into the philosophy around veganism, come to a conclusion that they agree with veganism, but they're not motivated to be vegan. Then when they have the visceral experience of watching the footage, that like tips them into like, okay, now I can act on my ethics.
Right.
So that might get at some like motivation, external or internalism. But just to take it back, because I think we actually have basically reached agreement here, and I want to try to go over it and see if we just how in agreement we are. So just with that final kind of fact we got to about what people's ultimate underlying values are, we're both taking an agnostic position. I think not because we don't have intuitions. I have intuitions one way actually on this, but just because we don't have the data and we're not going to sit here getting into an empirical discussion without data. But the kind of basic examples that I've given here and that even you've just given, like, I mean, I think that, I'm not trying to score a point here, but I think that you kind of agree, it seems like you agree that most people have intuitions that are, like, not very friendly to just, like, harming animals and fucking with them. Like,
in fact, I'm inclined to think, as I expect you would, that, hundreds of years from now, animal things like factory farming and stuff. If things like factory farming and so on, right? Meat, industrialization of meat production and so on, that will be seen as something like slavery.
Yeah, I have a very strong intuition in that direction.
Yeah, so I share that with you.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you saying something else there? It's just your mic.
No, I was done.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think we're largely on the same page. So we agree that Name the Trade is completely effective against every person, and it'll persuade anyone to go vegan within. No, okay, I'm just kidding. But it seems like we largely agree. We're saying like, if people are exposed to this argument, doesn't matter if they're a generalist or a particularist. Based on the data we have access to, they're probably about equally likely to reflect on their views. Upon reflection, so if the particularist wishes to resist veganism and construct a carnist position, it is easier for the particularist to do that than the generalist, because the generalist position, you have to generate principles to justify your carnist position, and those principles are more likely to have unpalatable conclusions than particulars. And then when it comes to the underlying value set that people have before they try to construct a position or something like this, we, as far as we can tell, think that the values are likely to be the same, but we're not really sure if those values lean in the direction of veganism or not. But if we use our intuition, we'd say they probably kind of do. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, Jack, I think we've just resolved an issue. So, do you have anything else on that topic?
No, not really.